sign-in sheet. So if you're here, you're going to be in one of the three categories Bev talked about: the federal motor carrier people, FMCSA, the federal transit people, FTA. If you're not one of those two, you're just non-NON, non-DOT, write it in. So I'm going to pass this around. So when it gets to the department, I need you to write it because I have to do a certificate, especially for the DOT people. I have to identify under which operating administration you received your training. Please print legibly so that when we write your certificate, it has your right name on it. I'm going to go through this presentation. We got a lot of material to cover this morning. As Bev said, you can ask questions. I'll also give you guys a couple breaks, so you can come up to me during the break to ask questions. I'll be here afterwards if anybody wants to talk to me. Also, my business cards are there. You can call us 24/7 to ask any questions. We're living the dream over here. So 24/7, we live, real people, me or my assistant answer the phone, and we're here to help you and answer questions for you. It's not my program, it's not Bev's program, it's our program, everybody together. So that being said, we'll get this thing started. So the police, oh, here we go already. Okay, the police stop this elderly man at 2 o'clock in the morning and ask him where he's going. He says he's on his way to a lecture about drinking, smoking, staying out late. Cops are like, who is giving a lecture like that this time of night? The man says, that would be my wife. And then I put this slide up from my husband, Richard. He's not here today. He's out doing the job. But if y'all think his training's bad, somebody's collecting pee all day. Everybody comes in the office complaining about taking a drug test. He says, look, my wife's my boss and I collect pee all day. I don't want to hear it. So it could be worse. Now, all the joking aside, let's get to the serious business. So again, drug and alcohol use doesn't just affect the user, and company drug and alcohol testing doesn't just affect the company. Oh, again, I'm going to have trouble with this little mousey here. I can see that. So, I think I went way too far, but I may not have. Queen Anne's County has a zero tolerance policy, just so everybody's clear on that. That means if you test verified positive on any drug or alcohol test, okay, or any other violation of the policy, there will be a referral to an SAP, but immediate termination. SAP is a substance abuse professional. An immediate termination. Any applicant who applies for a job with the county and has a verified drug test positive, they will no longer be considered eligible for employment. So I just want to make sure everybody does understand that. So let me give you some statistics of drug and alcohol use. Why we do drug testing. 35% of employees have seen or heard of drug use on the job. That's what's admitted to it. I'm not going to go through all these, so I know your eyes are glazing over. We're just going to hit some of the major ones. 11% of employees have admitted to being offered drugs to use on the job. NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, they did a study, a survey, where they took major metropolitan hospitals, and anybody who presented with a work injury, they tested them for drugs and alcohol. And more than half of the people who presented to these hospitals with a work injury had drugs or alcohol, or in some cases both, on board. Alcohol use accounts for 15% of the nation's total health care costs. They're more likely to miss work or be hospitalized. Of the people who called a cocaine hotline, greater than 80% of those people admitted to using or dealing drugs on the job. 26.4 million people. If they were to go to a doctor, they would meet the diagnostic criteria to be admitted on an inpatient basis. They would meet the criteria to be considered substance dependent. So of those, 16.2 million met the criteria to be considered alcohol dependent, needing medical intervention, 5.6 million on illicit substances, and 4.6 million on both. So let me get to some of the meat of this potato here. 58 million people are considered or admitted. All this information comes from what's called the National Household Use Survey, NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, and SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Safety Administration from the government. They do this thing called the Household Use Survey, where they call about 90,000 homes, and they ask people a bunch of questions anonymously. They take their answers, and then they project it out over the population. So that's where they get this. So 58 million people, based on their phone calls, admitted to binge drinking. Binge drinking is where you have 5 or more drinks on at any one time, okay? So 58 million people admitted to binge drinking. 26.4 million people that met that diagnostic criteria to get admitted to the hospital, 61% of them are employed full-time. So that's why it matters for us, because a lot of people have this idea that when someone becomes to the level of substance dependency that they're going to be admitted to a hospital, that they're probably laying in an alley or laying home. They're not. 61% of them are in the workplace, and they are employed full-time. Let's see. It's not limited to off work hours. Here we go. 3.1% of people admitted that they used illicit drugs before coming to work. Let's see, 7.1% admitted to drinking during the workday. I'm just kind of glossing over some of these. If anybody wants a copy of this presentation, let me know. I'll email it to you because I don't want to get bogged down on all these statistics. Workers are likely to have missed 2 or more days in the past month. They are likely to have worked for 3 or more employers in the past year. The co-workers, if you don't take anything away from this presentation today, one thing you want to recognize, the first indicator you have a problem in your department, I'm speaking to you managers, is the co-worker complaints. The co-workers feel the brunt of it. They're the first ones to know when somebody's abusing substances because they're feeling the direct ramifications of it. The people who are missing work, somebody's got to do the work that's missed, somebody's got to stay late, somebody's got to make it up. So co-workers' performance has been negatively affected. Co-workers have reported being put in danger, having been injured, having to work harder, having to redo work, all because of a fellow employee's drinking or drug use. And it causes a lot of friction and a lot of discontention. And unfortunately, what happens is the workers, they get angry with you as a manager because you're not doing anything about this person that's using, but yet nobody wants to come forward and say so-and-so has a problem. So it's kind of a, catch-22 situation there. So if you start seeing coworker complaints, coworker friction, or you start noticing you're getting a lot of people requesting a transfer out of the department, there's probably a problem in there. So coworker friction is your first indicator, so take it seriously. People who abuse drugs, substances, or abuse alcohol tend to gravitate towards smaller businesses, smaller employers. There's a lot of websites that tell you list companies that drug test. It's assumed that most larger companies or municipalities are going to perform drug testing. Smaller businesses tend to be less apt to drug test, and they also tend to have a more lenient policy. A lot of times with small business, people don't want to, there's such a small, almost like family of workers that even if someone is using, nobody wants to confront them, nobody wants to say anything, so they kind of just keep going with what they're doing. But the effect hits the business hard because they use 8 times more benefits. They're 33% less productive. Again, they're likely to miss 3 weeks more in a year, 3 more work days, 3 weeks more, 3 times likely to be tardy. They use 50 to 80%, or they cause 50 to 80% of the workplace theft. 300 to 400% higher medical costs associated with these people. They're responsible for 50% of the serious accidents in the workplace and 40% of the fatal accidents. So I'm going to talk about DOT now. How many people here are covered under DOT? Raise your hand. So only a couple of you. So I'm going to try to not get us bogged down. Some of it applies to everybody, but mostly I'm talking to you guys. So DOT, we're talking about Department of Transportation. So as of January 1st, 2018, the DOT changed the testing panel. For many years, it was called the 9 to 5, being 5 classes of drugs: amphetamines, marijuana, PCP, cocaine, and opiates. The opiates, though, that were being tested for were only codeine, morphine, and heroin. They were not testing for the drugs of abuse that we know we have the opioid epidemic. So as of January 1st, these drugs were added to the testing panel. So those are hydrocodone, most people know it as Vicodin, hydromorphone, most people know it as Dilaudid, oxycodone, Percocet, oxymorphone, Opana. Okay? So when we do a drug test, now this applies to everybody, okay? When we do a drug test, we do an initial screening of the sample, okay? For DOT people, your sample has to go to the lab. It doesn't matter. Everything we collect it and immediately goes to the lab. For non-DOT people, we do have in our offices the instrumentation to do the same screening process at the lab. So the good news for you guys is we can screen the test right there in the office and the results get reported right away if it's negative. If it's non-negative, it gets bagged up and sent out the same way a DOT sample is. So when we collect a sample, okay, we're always going to split it into two. The reason that we do that, the lab only opens and tests the first bottle. In the event that bottle tests positive, the second bottle, which is still sealed up, can be sent to a second certified lab to be retested. If the second lab doesn't find what the first lab found, the whole test is canceled. So that's always done, okay? The cutoff levels are established by HHS. Now, why is that important? HHS does studies to see what should be the appropriate quote-unquote cutoff level. A good excuse or a good explanation of that would be passive inhalation. Every time someone tests positive for marijuana, they always say, well, it wasn't me, I was just around people smoking it. That's called passive inhalation. NIDA does studies right down here in Rockville. If anybody wants to get a job down there, but you'll probably lose your county job, you can go down there. They bring people in. They put them in a phone booth, size booth, little hermetically sealed booth, and they blow marijuana smoke on them all day long, and then they do drug tests on them to see whether or not you test positive. Based on the amount of nanograms of marijuana that they detect, that's where they determine the cutoff level. So the highest anybody ever tested was 10. So the cutoff level set at 15. So you could ride back and forth to the airport with Bob Marley in the car, and unless you hit it, you're not going to test positive. So that's where passive inhalation comes from. Another one to explain that would be poppy seeds. Y'all seen the Seinfeld episode where Elaine eats the bagels and tests? The cutoff level when they first started doing drug testing for opiates, for codeine and morphine, was 300 nanograms. Well, if you eat bagels, you will test positive. The level's now set to 2,000. So you would have to eat 5 pounds of poppy seeds, not just the bagels. So that's how they determine the levels. And they always monitor these so that everybody gets the best benefit of the doubt. So when we talk about a urine drug test, again, we call it a NIDA 5, even though we are testing for a few more drugs because marijuana, of course, is marijuana, cocaine. Amphetamine is amphetamine, ecstasy, MDMA, and methamphetamine. And the opiates, we now have codeine, morphine, heroin, and then the 4 I just talked about. And then we got PCP. So it's still called a NIDA 5 because it's 5 classes of drugs, but when we talk about metabolites, it's about 12. Testing for DOT people can occur anytime a safety-sensitive employee is on duty, anytime. For federal motor carrier, you can call somebody in on their day off for a drug test. For federal transit, you cannot. I don't believe the county's ever going to call somebody in on their day off for a drug test, so it's probably not applicable, but I'm just letting you know the rules. Alcohol testing has to be done immediately before, during, or after the performance of duties. You can never test anybody for alcohol on their day off. Alcohol's legal, you're perfectly allowed to ride around, cutting your grass, drinking a beer. You are not allowed to ride around cutting your grass, smoking grass. That's another story. These are some of the detection times that we find for urine. Opiates stay in the system 2 to 4 days. Cocaine, 8 to 48 hours. Amphetamines, 2 to 4 days. PCP, 2 to 4 days. Marijuana, 2 days to 6 weeks. Marijuana stored in the fat cells, so it hangs around for a long time. Benzos, which is Valium, Xanax, Ativan, 1 to 3 days. Barbiturates, 2 to 10 days. That's like Seconal, Tuinal, Furanol. Okay, so for DOT people, the DOT requires that Beverly has a negative drug test in her possession before you perform any safety-sensitive functions. Queen Anne's County requires that she has a negative drug test in her hands for any employee before you start. If somebody, and I'm telling this for managers, just so you know, if somebody comes in as an applicant, they have 2 business days to go get their drug test. If they don't get their drug test within 2 business days, they're no longer going to be considered. Because we always joke in the drug testing world and say that's a liquid IQ test. You give somebody more than 2 days, they got a chance to clean themselves up. If they can't pass a drug test that they know they're taking. So, if, and again, I'm talking to DOT people here, if an employee is out of the random testing pool for 30 days, they have to have a pre-employment drug test. Even though I know they might have been working for the county for 10 years, if they go out on medical, okay, and they're out of the random pool for 30 days, they have to have a pre-employment. For federal transit, it's 90 days. I know the non-DOT people, it doesn't apply, but I'm just letting the DOT guys know, because if an applicant or one of your employees would question why they got to go take a pre-employment test, that's why. It's not the county, that's DOT rules. Okay, random. So random testing is unannounced, unpredictable. It's done all throughout the year, okay? Beverly does not do the picking. White Glove does the picking. So please send all your hate mail to us. We're the ones that picked. Alcohol testing, again, has to be done only when somebody's driving, immediately before, during, or after. Drug testing can occur anytime they're on duty. And again, we're not going to call somebody in on their day off for a drug test, so I just had to tell you this. All right. If you are notified, this applies to everybody. If you are notified for a random that you've been selected, you have 2 hours from the time you've been notified to report. Now, our office is right over on Banjo Lane, so everybody should be able to report within 2 hours. If for some reason, for some crazy reason, something happens and somebody's not going to report, there needs to be a phone call made, because if they don't report within 2 hours, it's going to go down as a refusal, and a refusal is treated the same as a positive. So that would need to be communicated. It can't be later on, you know, the next day or the day after, oh yeah, I couldn't make it because of this or this. That would need to be reported. So make sure that your employees know if they're told to go for random, they got 2 hours to report, because we don't want to see somebody get in trouble. All right, so post-accident. And again, I know you guys with the non-DOT, your eyes are going to glaze over a little bit. For Queen Anne's County, supervisors should be using a post-accident form or some kind of form to document every accident, just so the county has all the facts. For DOT, if the DOT criteria isn't met, probably the county's going to require it under the county policy or company policy. Alcohol testing should occur within 2 hours. If it doesn't, you have to document why it didn't occur within 2 hours. If it doesn't occur within 8 hours, there's no point in trying to test anymore. That ship sailed, that's over. Drug testing, again, should occur right away. If it's not done within 32 hours, we're not going to continue to try to have a drug test. There's no point. All right, so again, I'm sorry, non-DOT people, but I got to talk to the DOT people about this just so everybody understands. For a DOT post-accident drug test, if ever there is a fatality, you have to do a DOT federal motor carrier. I'm talking to federal motor carrier people. You have to do a DOT drug test if ever there's a fatality. If any vehicle is towed from the scene and your driver is issued a citation within 32 hours, you have to do a DOT drug test. If anybody gets medical attention away from the scene and your driver gets a ticket within 32 hours, you have to do a DOT drug test. All right, and it's the same for alcohol. The only exception is it's within 8 hours. So why am I telling you this? Because you could have a driver who has an accident at, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You send them over to White Glove. At the time, there's no ticket. Somebody got towed, but there was no ticket. You send them over, so we do a non-DOT alcohol test and a non-DOT drug test, right? And then 12, 15 hours later, after the accident's been investigated, a citation's issued. Now, we need a DOT drug test because they got a citation within the 32 hours, right? And somebody got towed. But you say, oh, well, they already had their drug test. They had a non-DOT under company policy. So the driver would need to go back. The reason I'm telling you this is because if ever you're told to send somebody over for a drug test, send the person over, we'll sort it out later. Don't not send the person over thinking that, oh, they already had their drug test. If ever Beverly instructs somebody to send somebody for a drug test, it's imperative that they go. Even if you believe it's a mistake, have them go. We can always retrace what happened. If it is genuinely a mistake, we can cancel the test. But if they don't report, it's a refusal, and a refusal is treated the same as a positive. So that's why I'm telling you this, because it's kind of critical. And there have been times where an employee has had a non-DOT drug test under company policy, a ticket's been issued, a DOT test is required, and the supervisor says, oh, that's a mistake, HR's messed up, we already sent them over, and they don't send them. And the driver is then deemed as a refusal to test. So it'll fall actually on the driver. For FTA, you guys, it's a little easier to figure it out because it's always the fatality, but it's not got to do with the ticket. It's unless the employee's performance can be completely discounted. Is there any FTA people here in the room?
Jim. Where's Jim? Jim, you're FTA.
Jim, you're FTA. Okay, Jim. Jim, drug test after the presentation, Jim. Okay, when I say unless an employee, so the reason I'm telling you, because here's a scenario with FTA. Driver's driving the bus, going along, red light, driver hits the brakes, goes through the red light, boom, accident. Driver says, you know what, I was hitting the brakes and the bus wasn't stopping. And then we look at the records and we say, Bob just put brakes on that bus yesterday. The driver and Bob, the mechanic, both have to be tested. If a dispatcher tells a driver to go the wrong way up a one-way street and the driver does it, the driver and the dispatcher both have to be drug tested. So unless their performance can be completely discounted, and that's employees, not just the driver. All right, so enough on post-accident testing. Let's talk about reasonable suspicion. So reasonable suspicion, this is the DOT definition, is a belief that the employee is using or has used drugs or alcohol in violation of the employer's policy. It's drawn from specific, contemporaneous, articulable observations concerning the employee's behavior, speech, or body odors. What in the Sam Hill does that mean? Okay, specific, I got to be able to say what it is. I got to give, you guys have reasonable suspicion forms that have little check boxes that you can mark down the specific reasons. Contemporaneous, it has to be going on right now. Okay, if you're an employee and you get dispatched, say over to the Queen Anne's County Fairgrounds, and Beverly happens to be over there for some reason, and she sees you getting wheeled out on one of them Hannibal Lecter carts because you're so high or intoxicated. If you're during the day, during your working time, okay, that's going on now. She can call reasonable suspicion. But if she just sees you at the fair at night and you're not working and she sees you getting wheeled out on one of them carts, she might raise an eyebrow, but she can't call reasonable suspicion test. It's got to be going on right now. Okay, it can't be something that happened a week ago, last week. I saw you Saturday night at the American Legion dancing on the bar. Doesn't count. It's got to be what's going on right now. Again, articulable, I can put it into writing. It's more than a hunch. It's just, I got a feeling. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be something we can explain to the employee, because when you're taking somebody for reasonable suspicion, you got to call the donor in and confront them and tell them why they're going for a reasonable suspicion test. So you have to be able to explain to them. You can't just say, I got this feeling about you. That's not going to fly. And it's about, again, appearances, behavior, speech, body odors. A trained supervisor has to make those decisions. Guess what? You guys all got now more certification behind you, so now you're authorized to make those decisions. Alcohol testing, again, can only be done at the time. You can't, again, if you saw somebody Saturday at the Elks Club drunk at the Bull and Oyster Roast falling around the floor, you can't say, I think you got a drinking problem. Now, if you see them in the workplace falling around on the floor, yeah, you're within your rights. So it has to be going on when they're actually performing their duties. Okay. For federal motor carrier, you must fill out a report within 24 hours of the observation. I would do it before you even call the employee in. That way you have your documentation in order to present to the employee on the reason. FTA doesn't have a requirement, but it's very strongly recommended that you also complete it, because during an audit, that's what they're going to ask for. So it's not required, but they're still going to want to see it. All right, so when we're talking about reasonable suspicion testing, now under county authority, we may be doing a DOT test on a DOT employee, but we also have the right to do a non-DOT test on not only the non-DOT people, but on the DOT. So we can do a second test under county authority that authorizes us to do expanded panel testing. So we're going to do the regular DOT 9 to 5, But we can also add into the mix benzos, Valium, Xanax, Ativan, barbiturates, Seconal, Tuinal, Nembutal, buprenorphine, Suboxone, it's highly abused, fentanyl, carfentanil, designer drugs, K2, bath salts, or any other drugs that we feel may be appropriate to test for. The county reserves the right, okay, to add those drugs in. I got this one, and we call it the coroner's panel. This thing will test for like 480 metabolites. So if we feel necessary, and it's not, just so you guys, and I'm going to get into this later, I don't want y'all to think we're trying to catch an employee and nail their hide to the barn door. That's not what we're trying to do. Your job as a supervisor is to determine fitness for duty. It's all about safety in the workplace. And an employee who's under the influence of substances or alcohol in the workplace is unsafe to themselves and everybody around them. So that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to nail somebody's hide to the barn door. I just want to make that clear. So let's talk about a refusal to test. What's considered a refusal to test? Which carries the same consequence as a positive? Failure to appear for any test. Pre-employment, you got 2 business days. Random, you got 2 hours. So if you don't go, that's going to be considered a refusal. Failure to remain at the testing site until the testing process is complete. So you walk in and you get there and you sign in, and then you're like, you know what, I'm going to go do this or this and then come back. You can't leave. Once you get there, you have to stay. The only exception to that is the pre-employment. They can leave anytime up until they select a cup. Once you select a cup, the testing process has begun, and if they leave, it's a refusal. Failure to provide a specimen. If you're told to provide a specimen and you don't. Refusal to allow observation or monitoring of a specimen. Observation occurs when, if we get a sample, if you come out of the bathroom and you give me the sample and it smells like bleach and it's blue and it's fizzing up like Alka-Seltzer, that's going to be a suspicious sample. Now you have to do a second one under what's called direct observation. That means a same-sex collector is going to go into the stall with the employee. The employee's got to raise up the clothing above the waist, turn around. Got to pull the pants, underpants, all that down, turn around. We got to make sure there's nothing hidden, taped, tucked. I wish we could use one of those bomb mirrors. And then we have to watch them go body to bottle. That's what a direct observation is. If they say, no, I'm not doing that, or they won't lift the stuff up, that's going to be a refusal, okay? The only time refusals are done are, again, if there's something funny with the collection, if it's cold, if it smells like bleach, if it just looks like something crazy. Sometimes at the lab, well, the lab will report it as invalid. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. It's going to be required under direct observation. Something really wacky showed up that nobody can explain. The medical review officer is going to ask for another one under direct observation. And then follow-ups and return to duty. But follow-up and return to duty aren't going to apply to you. Those are for people who violate and then come back. You have a zero tolerance policy here, so they're not going to count. Okay. Failure to provide a sufficient urine or breath sample without a medical explanation. If you come in and you are not able to give us enough urine, I'm going to talk about a shy bladder in a minute. We have a thing where we give you 3 hours and 40 ounces and give you an opportunity to provide. If at the end of the 3 hours you can't provide, we discontinue the collection process, and the county has to send you for a medical evaluation. We have to send you to a doctor to evaluate, was the reason you couldn't give the sample because you have a valid medical reason or because you just didn't want the results. That doctor will make the determination of whether they found anything medically legitimate. If they do, it's considered a canceled test. If they don't, then you're deemed to have refused a sample, but you will get the opportunity to have the medical evaluation. Same thing if somebody can't give an adequate breath sample. Now, if they can't give a breath sample, we can switch over to a saliva. However, if the saliva is positive, we still need the breath. So if they don't blow and then they don't have a valid reason why, it's a refusal. Failure to take a second test that the collector or employer has instructed the employee to take. That's why I said if ever Beverly tells you to send somebody over, even if it's a second test, just do what she says. Possessing or wearing a device intended to help the employee pass a drug test. So if you come out of the bathroom and your butt wedge is sticking out of the top of your pants and we see it, that's going to be a problem. Or, you know, your Whizzinator drops out of your shirt, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a refusal. Admitting adulteration or substitution of the specimen to the collector. I did have a guy one time, I always talk about the blue field. I did have a guy one time. He came out and set that cup down. As soon as that bathroom door opened, I could smell the bleach. He set it down and it was blue and it was fizzing, looked like Alka-Seltzer. I was like, And he said, I swear that's my urine, ma'am. I said, well, you better sit down in that chair because I'm calling 911. And then he said, don't call 911. I put a dishwashing tablet in there. So once he admitted it, it was a refusal. If the MRO reports it as a verified, adulterated, or substituted for alcohol testing, not signed in step 2, post-accident. This I'm talking to supervisors again. It doesn't matter, DOT, non-DOT. If you talk to them, or when I talk to employees, I tell them the same thing. If you have an accident, you have to remain readily available for testing, okay? And especially DOT. That means if somebody has an accident, like I said, you could have that scenario where they get a non-DOT test for the county and then all of a sudden a ticket's issued and they now are required to have a DOT. And the supervisor, you're trying to call because it happened on Friday and now Saturday morning here comes a ticket, now we need a DOT. You're trying to call the employee, phone's off, or the number you have is disconnected. If you don't get a hold of that employee within 32 hours to do that test, that employee is deemed to have refused that test because they are required, when they get their CDL license, they agree that they will remain readily available. So I always tell employees when I'm doing training to employees, make sure the supervisor has your home number, your cell phone number, your phone's charged, they got Aunt Bunny's number, they got the corner store, wherever you're going to be, make sure that they are readily available because the fact that you could not get a hold of them is not going to cover them. They are supposed to remain readily available. So you as supervisors, make sure, especially DOT, that you have all your employees' information because if you got to get a hold of them, you need to get a hold of them. All right. So if, like I said, you can't give the sample and we call you a shy bladder and we set you up an appointment to see Dr. Hoo-Hoo at 2 o'clock on Thursday for your medical evaluation and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to Dr. Hoo-Hoo. Once you to refuse to go to that medical evaluation, your refusal to test. Failure to cooperate with the testing process. So that's where you refuse to empty your pockets, or you refuse to wash your hands, or you start becoming disruptive or belligerent during the testing process. The collector will warn you twice. This is disruptive behavior. It can be deemed a refusal to test. Refusal to test carries the same as a positive. And then for the direct observation, again, failing to allow the collector or failing to do the up, down, turn around, pee, hokey pokey. All right, so again, Queen Anne's County has a zero tolerance policy. All right, so let's talk about the shy bladder quickly. So if you go into the restroom, when you show up, it's batter up. If the bathroom's open and we don't have a donor in there, it doesn't matter whether you feel like you got to go or not. DOT says when you sign in and we're ready to take the next donor, you got to make an attempt. So you go in there. Now you come out and it's less than 45. If it's a normal urine sample, it's just short of 45, we have to discard it and then we have to give you 40 ounces of water evenly distributed over 3 hours. You got 3 hours to make the attempt, okay? You don't have to drink water. That's not a refusal to test if you don't want to. At the end of the 3 hours, if you don't provide a sample, you got to go for the medical evaluation. They'll determine whether or not there was anything going on. We do have to discard the sample because we can't put 2 or 3 voids together. There's a different, they do, and I'm going to talk about in a minute, specimen validity testing, and there's different pH and different specific gravity every time you go. So if we put them all together, it would get to the lab and they'd be like, I don't know what kind of science experiment this is, but something's not right. So we can't put it together. We have to have 45 milliliters because we have to have enough for the 2 bottles. That's why the DOT, it won't even accept it if it's less than 45. All right, so now I'm going to talk about specimen validity testing. So if you go on Google and you Google a drug test, you will find 10-to-1 information on how to beat a drug test over any information that you're going to find about actual drug testing. So every specimen, even the screening ones that we do in our office, our instrumentation does specimen validity before it even screens for the presence of drugs, as does the lab. When the sample gets there, they screen for specimen validity to make sure it's a valid human urine sample before they even run it through the testing process. This is a billion-dollar industry. On the break, I suggest you come up here. There is a million products out there to tell you that you can take this, eat this, drink this to try to beat a drug test. We check for that. There are a gazillion ways that people will try to substitute. This one here, for example, quick fix is synthetic urine. Okay, it looks like urine. Comes with a little temperature vial right on there. Comes with a hot pack to heat it up. If you don't do specimen validity testing, and I sent this to the lab, they would report this as negative. If I didn't have specimen, now DOT requires specimen validity on all, non-DOT it's optional. We do specimen validity on everything. If I sent this to the lab and I didn't order specimen validity, they would report this back as negative, okay? There's, and I'm gonna talk about some of these things. Let me get back over here and then we'll get back to some of these things. So specimen validity is critical. One of the things we test for is dilute. Okay, that was where we test the specific gravity and the creatinine. Some people drink a lot of water naturally, but some people are drinking a lot of water because if you go on these websites, just like any of those products that I have, the first thing it says on the box is drink at least 2 gallons of water prior to your test. Okay, so we're going to check for those 2 mechanisms to see if it's a dilute sample. There's 2 kinds of dilutes. There's a normal dilute, which Queen Anne's County is going to require be recollected if it's a random or pre-employment. It's irrelevant for post-tax and a reasonable suspicion. But if it's a super dilute, that's where the creatinine and the specific gravity are not consistent with human urine. That's where they poured water into the sample. Okay, they actually added water. Now, in the facility, we have the water shut off. We have blue in the toilet. We have the tank sealed up. So they would have to sneak the water in to add to it. But if you go on some of these websites, that's one of the little tricks they tell you is put water in it. So the adulterants, again, there's a billion-dollar industry on these adulterants. When it first started with drug testing, people started using household things, bleach, acid, vinegar, lemon juice, eye drops, adding all this stuff because there was all these, myths about this will help you to beat a drug test. Of course, all these things are going to show up as being invalid in the specimen validity. One of the little things that's on the internet is for marijuana people is niacin. It says take a bunch of niacin and you'll pass your drug test. Now, anybody here ever took too much niacin? If you take too much niacin, you will get bright red like you have a sunburn. You'll be itching all over. And we can always tell because if people come in like now, February, and they're like blood red, like they're sunburned, it's like, let me guess, niacin, right? It's not going to work. It doesn't work, but it's all these myths on the internet about doing it. Now, this is taken directly from marijuana.com. This guy's giving step-by-step directions on how to go in and do your substitution. A couple of the items that I have here. Here you got a pair of stash boxers. So this one has the little pouch in the front to stash. This here is your Ninja stash. Now this one here, he comes with the bottle with the temperature gauge on it. And he gives you the little hot pad in here that the first time you use it, it's got a little bead in there. You click it and it gets hot. After you use it the first time, in case you didn't like that job and you got to use it again, you can just heat it up, boiling water to get it hot. And then this little thing clips inside your belt and goes right down in. It's got the little retractable. So you got your whole little hidden pouch of snuck in marijuana right there to take in with you. Another reason we don't let people take hats, so you got the hat with the little pouch in it. There's cell phones. They sell, which is why we won't let people take cell phones. For about $150, you can buy this cell phone. It looks like a cell phone, but it's got urine in it. And it actually, on the screen, when you push the button, and it's got a heating element in it. So when you push the button on the screen, it tells you what the temperature is. So you'll know. And the $250 model, alarm goes off when it's within the right temperature range. It vibrates, so you know when it's right. So that's when the people that come in, I'm not ready to go yet. Yeah, because you're sitting there trying to heat that urine up to get in there. So there's fake shoes with fake heels. If you guys only knew half of the stuff that's out there, it's a billion-dollar industry. Sorry, ladies, I know it's a little bit graphic. This is some of the stuff that they have that you can buy. The urinator, that's a rib belt that you buy. It keeps the urine heated. You can wear it right around your midsection there, and you're good to go. Got your heated urine in it. They got the shampoo there that you can use to beat a hair test, the mouthwash there. He's going to give you a 200% money-back guarantee if you don't pass. Good luck. That, I know graphic there, that's the new Wizinator. Those guys that did the Wizinator, they went to jail. So another company came in and they actually redeveloped the Wizinator. I got a picture on that board of them selling the Wizinator on the Home Shopping Club before those guys went to jail. The Wizinator they had, or the new Wizinator, you can actually buy it in any color. There's 12 colors available. The Diva Cup, that's for women. That's the women's version of the Wizinator. You got Spike up there. That's a product that you're supposed to add to your urine sample. UPass, that's another one. That's a little flushing mechanism that you take. Again, the vial down there in the baggie, that's where you can buy horse urine, dog urine, or pig urine and substitute that. And then, of course, the synthetic urine. These are videos on YouTube. There's hundreds of videos that show you how they go through step by step, how to beat a drug test. There's books. I got these two books over here. This book was written by two scientists that tell you how to beat a drug test. And this one is written by a scientist as well. And he gives you, again, step by step, multiple ways to cover all different ways to beat a drug test. He gives you the breakdown on how to wash it out of your system without being dilute and the whole bit. So it is a billion-dollar industry. Oh. All right. So then we get, of course, the rejected invalid. It's a constant battle. The lab does test for specimen validity, but they're constantly revamping these products. Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, he's made more money on his product, Urine Luck, than he has on anything else. He started with Urine Luck 2.0. Now he's up to like 18.0. He keeps reformulating it, and it's made just specifically so that marijuana can't be detected either in the screening process or the confirmation process. Every time they reformulate, the scientists at the laboratories have to try to figure out. So sometimes there's a window where the product may interfere, but they don't know why, so they can't really say it's definitely adulterated or substituted, so they'll just call it invalid because there's something wrong with it. It's either affected the pH, it's made the sample not suitable for testing, it's interfering with the screening process, or it's interfering with the confirmation process. They know there's something wrong with it, they just don't know what. So in that case, what happens is the MRO will call the donor. If the donor can produce medically legitimate explanation, i.e. a prior urine test, like from a doctor that showed that they have the pH, because it's like, why do you have a pH of 3.0, the pH of a cadaver? Well, I have that all the time. If you can produce evidence that this is normal for you, that prior to this drug test you had urines that had a 3.0 pH, then they'll report that as canceled. Good. But if you can't produce evidence, they're going to say it's invalid. She's going to be instructed to immediately send you over for a direct observation. So all the results, all DOT and all non-negative, non-DOT are sent to an MRO. An MRO is a medical review officer. They are licensed physicians. Let's skip past the positive. Well, the positive is never positive till the MRO says so. They are licensed physicians. They're impartial gatekeepers. They don't work for me. They don't work for Beverly. They don't work for the lab. Their job, they get the results in from the laboratory. They look at the results. They make sure the collector did everything they were supposed to do. The chain of custody, everything lines up, matches up. They make sure the lab did everything they were supposed to do, and then they physically call the donor and talk to them and do what's called a donor interview to give the donor an opportunity to provide a medically legitimate explanation for why we found, whatever metabolite showed up from the laboratory. This would be prescriptions and this kind of thing, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. So their job, they're the gatekeeper. They don't have a dog in the fight. They're just making sure everybody did what they're supposed to do. If you do have a prescription, it's their job to verify that it's legitimate and legal. So now I think that's what I'm going to talk about now is prescription drugs. So all prescription drugs that show up on a drug test are verified by the medical review officer. When you take a drug test, you have to give us phone numbers, and those are the numbers that the MRO is going to call to talk to you. The MRO is going to ask you to explain why whatever metabolites were in there. You're going to have to produce a copy of the prescription. They're going to contact the pharmacy that filled it, and in some cases talk to the physician that filled it. Now, this is the part I want you guys to understand about prescriptions, because it's where people get in trouble. You know, when you get a Rite Aid or Walgreens and you get to get your prescription and all that stuff comes up on the little window and you're like, next, 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 next. You just want to sign and get out of there. Well, all that little stuff that you're next, 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 next. I'm talking about controlled substances. What makes them controlled? You're agreeing that you will take that medication solely for the reason that the doctor prescribed it to you. So let me give you a little scenario here. I go and I get a root canal. And my dentist gives me 5 Percocet, and I take 2 in May. I take 2 and I'm good. I got 3 in my medicine cabinet. And then it's October, and I'm on the roof helping Mr. White clean some leaves out of the gutter, and I fall off the roof. And I'm like, oh, my back. And I go inside, and I'm like, where's them Percocet? Bzz. Because my dentist did not prescribe those Percocets for my back. Unless I'm a pharmacist with a medical license, a license to prescribe, and a license to dispense, the minute I touch that controlled substance, I'm illegal. I don't have a legitimate medical explanation. Now, what can I do? Before I reach for the medicine cabinet, I need to reach for the phone, and I need to call my family doctor. Dr. Hoo-Hoo, I just fell off the roof. Yes, I hurt my back. I have 3 Percocet. Can I please take one? If Dr. Hoo-Hoo gives me the directions to take one, then guess what? Now, if the next day I get a drug test, I'm going to be positive. The prescription label is going to show my dentist in May for post-dental procedure pain, and the MRO is going to be like, what? Wait, you had the tooth in May. Why are you taking a Percocet in October? And I'm going to say, well, I fell off the roof, but I called my doctor. Now the MRO is going to talk to my doctor, and my doctor can say, yes, I instructed her to take that medication. Do you see what I'm saying? If I just took it, and I took the drug test the next day, I'm not going to pass that drug test because I don't have a valid medical explanation. So that's why I'm telling you guys this, because a lot of people think it's in my medicine cabinet, it's prescribed for me. Okay, it may be, but you're playing with fire by doing that. So you need to make sure you have cover by making sure that whatever you're taking it for, your doctor's aware and is going to back you up, because that's the legitimate medical explanation.
I have a question when it comes to therapeutic range. So if I am prescribed some kind of narcotic and I am tested and the MRO says that it is valid, that it comes up within a therapeutic range, and that I was allowed to take it, I still drive an emergency vehicle for a living, in which I'm not supposed to be under the care of a narcotic.
Well, I'm going to talk about that's a safety concern, and I'm glad you brought that up because that may even be my next slide. So you might have been an awesome segue for me. Awesome. High five that girl. Look. So, DOT. I'm talking to the DOT people in the room, but there's also, this can apply to non-DOT people. The MRO may very well talk to the donor and say, yeah, there's a legitimate medical explanation for why I found what I found, right? They had the prescription, but I have a safety concern with them taking that medication. Now, DOT, I can guarantee you it's going to be a safety concern, because the DOT, especially for CDL drivers, which both the transit drivers and the federal motor carrier, on the DOT physical, it says you're not qualified to drive if you are taking a habit-forming medication or narcotic, unless that medication was given to you by a practitioner who is aware of what you do and does not feel it poses a safety risk. So, what's the process? Donor tests positive, laboratory positive. MRO interviews the donor, gets the prescription. MRO verifies the prescription. It's medically legitimate. They report it as negative to Beverly. The MRO is going to tell you, I need to speak to your physician, because they got to make sure that your doctor knows what you do for a living. If they find out you're an EMT, that's going to trigger a safety concern. Some people have a couple narcotics that just the fact that they're taking 2 is going to trigger the safety concern. It may not, they could be an office worker, but it's still a safety concern because of the combination. So they say, I need to speak to your doctor, and they'll tell you, have your doctor call me. If they don't hear from your doctor within 5 days, they're going to issue a safety letter. Now, for the DOT, what does that mean? you have to send that person back for a fitness for duty evaluation to the person who did their DOT physical. How many people in here had a DOT physical? Okay, you guys know on page 1 you had to list your medications, right? So if you listed these medications, that means that the medical examiner was aware you were taking them, followed the rules, talked to your doctor. They don't feel it's posing a threat because, as she said, you're taking it at night or you're only taking it occasional and it doesn't pose a safety risk, so they signed off. But if you didn't list that medication in your DOT physical and now it shows up in your urine, you've got to go back to that doctor and you've got to get that doctor who signed off on the first DOT physical to clear you. So you may have a problem. In 2018, when these 4 drugs got added onto the panel, I had 27 safety letters issued. 23 of those 27 drivers were disqualified when they went back to the medical examiner because they forgot to list that medication. Now, if you're taking it short term for what's called a acute problem, like a dental procedure, that's not going to trigger a safety letter because they know you only got 5 from the dentist, so that's it, you're done, you took it. Somebody asked me in another presentation, well, what if I had a knee replacement? Well, if you had a knee replacement, you're not using narcotics, you're not driving or operating equipment or in your job when you first come out of the hospital. And by the time you return to work, you should be off the narcotics by that point. So it shouldn't be an issue. So you have to make sure DOT and supervisors of DOT, make sure your employees know that they should have reported those medications. If for some reason they didn't, Beverly has this form, I have this form, Federal Motor Carrier put this form out, but FTA people can use it. This is a form that they can take to their family doctor that allows their doctor to see the definition of what a commercial motor vehicle driver is, agree that they don't feel it poses a safety threat. If you have this letter signed, that's going to get you through without being disqualified. So it's very important, and that's a great question.
I was just wondering if when I send new employees to get a drug screen, a lot of times they'll tell me, well, I'm taking a medication, should I take it with me? And when they
That's a great question.
So I just wondered what your policy was.
We are not allowed under HIPAA. We are not allowed to take any information. We get this all the time. Sometimes people come in with like 2 big Ziploc bags full of medication. We're not allowed to take that information. The medical review officer is a doctor. They are the only ones that are authorized to take that medication. And a lot of times donors get really angry with us. Can't you just take it? No, it's a HIPAA violation, number 1. And number 2, the MRO will not accept medical information from anyone except the patient. So the donor has to be the one to provide that information to the MRO. Now, the MROs are really good. They have the university, my MRO, they have a website it can be uploaded to. People can take a picture with their cell phone and text it in. They have a variety of ways that information can be transmitted for them to verify, but we cannot take it. It actually says on the chain of custody in step 5, where the donor signs, it tells them that the MRO may contact you and that you should make a list of medications if you would like on your copy only. We are prohibited. Really, Queen Anne's County, Bev, Sue, you all shouldn't really even be knowing that information because it becomes an ADA. So any employee who wants to verify that the medication's not going to pose a safety concern, you can call us, White Glove, and we'll talk to you about it. We can even, if it's out of our league, we can get the MRO involved to kind of help you wade through that. Because sometimes you are taking something that does pose a safety concern, and sometimes it's because, most of the time, I'm going to just tell you guys the truth. Doctors, when you go see a doctor, your doctor is not paying attention to what you do for a living. They're looking at 2 things on your chart. They're looking at what your chief complaint is and what your insurance is, well, and your vital signs. Because they're trying to figure out how to treat you and where they're going to send you for treatment or what the form of treatment they're going to do. They're not paying attention to what you do for a living. So if you don't point that out to them, they may give you a narcotic that, had they known you were a school bus driver, or had they known you were an EMT, or had they known you were driving a dump truck, they probably would not have given, they might have given you something else to take during the day and then told you take this at night. So again, it's just an unfortunate way that things are done, and that's why the burden is on the employee. So that is a great question that she asked, and if you ever think you're taking a medication that could pose a safety threat, contact us, because really Bev and Susan aren't going to be able to help you with that because they're really not supposed to know about that. It's kind of an ADA. I'm going to talk about CBD oils, so you're another one giving me a good segue into that. I got about a ton of slides on CBD oils.
What if they take somebody else's prescription?
There you go. Great question, Bev, because I got off track. Taking someone else's prescription is not legitimate, okay? It is not legitimate. A prescription has to be prescribed for you by a legal doctor. So them, if you see those ones that they do the online consultation, that's not considered legal. Legal under the definition is face-to-face with a patient or a patient known to you. In other words, your doctor can prescribe something over the phone for you if you're their patient, not if they've never seen you. Okay? Now, I know sometimes with dentists, you know, you call a dentist on Saturday night or something, you never seen them, and they might give you something till Monday, but you're going to see them on Monday. So you understand what I'm saying? They're not going to just, right, you guys got me. But taking someone else's prescription, no. You cannot take somebody else's prescription because you have no authority. They don't have authority to give it to you, and you don't have authority to take it from them. If your doctor instructs you, I had that one time. I had 2 bus drivers in the county that I do, and the man got the chest cold, she got the chest cold first, and he gave her a cough syrup with codeine. And the following Saturday, the man started coughing, and he was keeping her up with his coughing, and she was like, if you don't do something, you are going to the hospital one way or another. So he got on the phone and called the doctor, and he said, she still has half a bottle left. Can I take some? Doctor said yes, made him come in Monday, but the doctor prescribed it over the phone. So he did, and it was funny because he didn't have the appointment until like in the afternoon Monday, and he did get picked Monday morning for a drug test. So, but his doctor confirmed, he did speak to him Saturday night, and he instructed him to take the medication. So it was all legit. So let's talk about some drugs and alcohol. So this comes from the NIDA Household Use Survey. 42.4 million people admitted to using, this in the past 30 days, admitted to using marijuana in the past 30 days. 3.9 million admitted to cocaine. 1.2 million admitted to using crack. 1.6 million admitted to methamphetamine. 892,000 admitted to ecstasy. 5.2 million admitted to heroin. 279,000 admitted to PCP, and 29.4 million people admitted to illegally using their prescription drugs in the past 30 days. So let's talk about alcohol first. So alcohol is socially acceptable. It's a legal drug. It's legal, been legal. When it's consumed for recreation, social gatherings, it's fine. However, when the primary reason that someone consumes it is for the mood-altering effects. In other words, if you're drinking to get stinking drunk, then you're abusing alcohol. It becomes a substance of abuse. So here we got 66.9 million people admitting to binge drinking. Binge drinking is when you have 5 or more drinks on the same occasion. 29.3 million people admitted to heavy drinking. That's where you binge drink 5 or more times in a 30-day period. So you might binge drink because you went to a wedding, but unless you're wedding crashers, you're going to have trouble with the heavy drinking part, right? 22 million people admitted to drinking on the job or just prior to going to work. 44.2 million people admitted to driving under the influence. So when we consume alcohol, alcohol works on the brain the same way as anesthesia does. It actually anesthetizes the brain from the outer brain to the inner. So when you have 1 to 4 drinks, you know, your inhibitions get lowered, you become overly friendly, your judgment gets a little bit inhibited maybe, right? You have some inappropriate behavior, repetitive speech, you know, somebody gonna tell you 27,000 times that they love you. When they start drinking a little more, 5 to 8 drinks now you're starting to get sloppy, you got a loss of motor control, your reaction time slowed, your eye-hand coordination slowed, your speech gets slurred, you get some balance problems, uninhibited speech, that's where you say something, whoop, wish I hadn't have said it, no do-overs. You get confused, they got difficulty remembering, you know, sometimes you've been around somebody who's really drunk and they ask you the same question 17 times. They get drowsy. If you can handle the 9+ drinks, which most social intolerant people can't. By this point, 9+ drinks, you have completely lost your ability to reason. Y'all know that adage about trying to argue with a drunk, right? Forget about that. Loss of major muscle control, stupor, unconsciousness, blackouts, alcohol poisoning, and death. It will anesthetize your brain to a point that it will get to the inner portion of your brain, the portion that controls the involuntary reflexes, that's your breathing, your heart rate, and it'll put that portion of your brain to sleep, and you will die. So, alcohol. 10% of people who drink will become alcoholics, fatal liver diseases, pancreatitis. 54% of all birth defects are related to alcohol use. Social issues. I do prison ministry, and I could tell you from anecdotal stories it's true. 2/3 of all homicides were committed by people who drank immediately prior to the crime. 2/3 of all homicides were committed by people who drank immediately prior to the crime. 2 to 3% of the driving population is legally drunk at any one time. I'm sure the officers could back me up, and that rate's doubled on nights and weekends. Separation and divorce, 7 times greater. NIDA, they did another study with major metropolitan hospitals. Anybody who presented with a burn or a fall, they tested them for alcohol. 60% of the people who came in with a burn and 40% of the people who came in with a fall had alcohol on board. So they're getting drunk, deep fat frying turkeys, climbing up ladders. So people say, you know, I only had 2 beers. Now, I'm not talking about something somebody's dispensing in their own house. I'm talking about if you go to a bar or a place that serves alcohol where they have measured amounts of alcohol. There is the same amount of alcohol in a 12-ounce beer as there is in a 5-ounce glass of wine, as there is in a 1.5-ounce shot of 80 proof liquor. They're all the same. Again, I'm not talking about what somebody has in their home where they got that glass of wine that holds the whole wine bottle. We're talking about what's dispensed in a bar. Okay, alcohol is absorbed through the stomach and small intestines. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes once you take a drink for it to reach what's called the blood-brain barrier. It takes 30 to 60 minutes for the full absorption. Food will slow that absorption. The body eliminates alcohol at a rate of 1 drink every hour and a half. So on TV where you see the guy, they got him, they're giving him coffee and they're putting him in the shower and they got him out walking around. He's clean, he's wide awake, he's aerobically fit, but he's still drunk. Only time is going to get that alcohol out of his system. This slide shows us someone who drinks on a full stomach versus empty. The solid line's empty stomach. You see that individual takes a drink and their alcohol level, blood alcohol level, immediately spikes right up, but then it starts to drop. So person with the food, their alcohol level doesn't get quite as high, but it tends to stay in their system a little longer. So, abusive drinking. When we talk about someone who's alcohol abuse, I'm not talking about abusive drinker, somebody who gets drunk and beats people up, although they may manifest their alcohol use that way. You're considered an abusive drinker if your alcohol use is affecting one of these 5 areas of your life and you're still continuing to drink at the same way, your behavior's not changing, you're drinking the same amount, doing the same thing, you're now abusing alcohol. So I use this next slide because this slide is going to describe, hopefully nobody in this room, but you'll recognize, everybody usually recognizes somebody they know. Alcohol abuse, when you abuse alcohol, it's more behaviors that encapsulate what we call alcohol abuse. So hopefully, like I said, everybody's going to recognize somebody that they know. You'll be like, yeah, that's Uncle Jimmy, or yeah, that's that guy down the street. So the person who abuses alcohol, they drink purely to become drunk. They drink at a certain time each day. They become irritable if the pattern or time gets disrupted. Drink by themselves on purpose. They're not social drinkers. They become aggravated if you ask them to justify their drinking or the amount that they drink. They increase their social drinking from just having a glass of wine with dinner to they're having 3 to 5 drinks a day. Stash bottle. Now, I always tell this story. My first husband, he was an alcoholic. He actually drank himself to death. And I had new carpet put in, and the guys came to put the carpet in, and they picked my couch up, and they're walking, and I hear this clink, clink, clink. I was like, what in the Sam hell is that? When they turned it sideways to go through the door, about I don't know, 10 to 15 half-pint vodka bottles fell out because he would drink his vodka bottle and then shove it down in the couch. So if you see somebody hiding their liquor bottles either before or after they consume them, you see the guy wrapping it all up in like 20 paper bags, taking it out and hiding it in the bottle. They're hiding it from themselves. They're not hiding it from anybody else. It's just the bottles are representation that this ain't right, so they want to hide it. They don't want to see it. They might go buy 6 half pints, but they'll only have one out. They'll hide the rest of them in a closet somewhere, and then after they're drunk, they're empty, they'll hide them. Increased tolerance. You know, he used to just drink a 6-pack. Now he's starting with 2 cases coming out of the liquor store. Prefer to go to functions only where alcohol is served. I always tell this story. My husband's cousin was getting married at Kurtz's Pleasure Beach over in Anne Arundel County, and we had gone to the wedding. They did the wedding outside, and then the reception was inside. So we get inside, and my husband's sister, she drinks a lot, okay? So we're sitting there, and everybody just sitting down, sitting at the table. And we were there like 5 minutes, and all of a sudden she was like, okay, oh my God, hold it. And we were like, what? I thought something was going on. She was like, I don't see a bar. And I was like, well, you know, maybe it's like a dry wedding, like not everybody drinks. You know, maybe they don't, believe in. Oh, no. This is the information you print directly on the invitation. You don't bring people here on a Saturday and not serve alcohol. This is ridiculous. I would have sent a gift. I never would have came. And then she's like, okay, wait. And she starts naming all the liquor stores between her house and the Kurtz's Pleasure Beach that she can go to. And I'm just sitting there like, and then all of a sudden the little wall peeled back and the bar got exposed. And she was like, okay, everyone calm down. It's cool. Tend to have a favorite drink and complain if it's not available. Begin to have strained family relationships. Loss of interest in their prior activities or hobbies. A guy used to be an avid golfer. Now his golf clubs are in the corner full of dust, or his fishing rods are on eBay being sold because he ain't fished in 2 years. So alcoholism is where abuse goes a step further, because when we talk about drinking, we got the social drinker, the abusive drinker, and then if they keep going, they're going to cross over into alcoholism. Once they cross over into the alcoholism threshold, they are physically dependent on the drug. They are absolutely drinking at work. They can never be zero. They're not going to be zero. They're constantly needing an infusion of alcohol to even appear normal. They will look completely in distress if alcohol starts being withheld. They have a craving for alcohol and a high tolerance, a loss of quantity control. Often with alcoholics, they'll get a bottle and they'll take and they'll put a mark on it and say, I'm only drinking down to this. Well, 4 empties later on the way to the liquor store, they are physically dependent on the drug, and withdrawal symptoms will immediately occur when alcohol stops being ingested. So this slide here shows us the non-tolerant, people who don't drink or social drinkers, they're on the left column, and then the alcoholic. So just for the argument of this slide, I put the 0 up there, although they're never going to be at 0. So we all appear normal. If I went out and got the breathalyzer and tested everybody in here 0, we're all normal. The alcoholic, they're in severe withdrawal. They've got tremors, vomiting, anxiety. They have a greater than 98% chance to have a fatal seizure at this point. 0.05. You're now over the workplace limit. For those of you with a CDL license, that's a violation. That's the same, a DUI for you if you're operating a commercial vehicle. 0.04 is your cutoff, so you're over the limit. The alcohol, we have diminished alertness, impaired judgment. The alcoholic, continued severe withdrawal, greater than 90% chance of having a seizure. 0.1. Okay, so now everybody here is over the legal driving limit, right? You got a slow reaction time, you got impaired motor functions. The alcoholic, they got some relief. They're still very uncomfortable, but they're starting to feel a little relief. They still got a 50% chance to have a fatal seizure. 0.15. Okay, you're almost twice the legal driving limit now. You're increasingly impaired motor function. They're starting to feel better. Their tremors are starting to go away, and they're starting to feel a little bit normal. Okay, 0.2. You're clearly drunk. Okay, you're the guy that you see on World's Wildest Police video when they're trying to do the sobriety checkpoint and he's dancing around with the highway cone on his head. The alcoholic's just starting to get their appetite back. 0.25. You're staggering. You're grossly impaired motor skills. I mean, you are just like so drunk. The alcoholic, they're just starting to feel comfortable. 0.3. you're now in a stupor. You can't even comprehend your surroundings. This is where you see on the TV the college kids where they're drawing on people's face, or they put them on a raft and float them out in the middle of a lake because they don't even know what's going on. The alcoholic's just starting to feel buzzed. 0.35. Up until 1906, this is the amount of alcohol they would give you to do surgery, surgical anesthesia. You can get your appendix out. Black market people can come steal your kidney. You won't know it. The alcoholic, they're just starting to feel signs of intoxication. 0.4. That's the lethal dose for 50% of the people in this room. 50% of the people in this room, if you have a 0.4 blood alcohol level, you will die. The alcoholic, they're just starting to look drunk. 0.6. Lethal dose. None of us, nobody that's intolerant will survive a 0.6 blood alcohol. The alcoholic just now starts to pass out. So alcohol, while it's legal, it can be a serious problem in the workplace. So reprieve, y'all get a 5-minute break. Woo! Take 5. 80 more slides to go. Yeah, I just want to bring y'all back because we got like a lot of slides to go, and I want to get y'all out of here at 11 o'clock. So the next drug that I want to talk about is amphetamines. Amphetamines. And when I talk about amphetamines, that's a class of drugs. So we're talking about amphetamine, methamphetamine, and ecstasy. Those are the 3 drugs that we're actually talking about. So amphetamines as a class are central nervous system stimulants. You know, they kind of mimic the endorphins, if you will. The legal ones, usually they're treated, you know, prescribed Adderall, amphetamine, prescribed for narcolepsy, depression, ADHD. Methamphetamine and ecstasy are the illegal forms of amphetamines. So methamphetamine or meth, it's the most addictive, the most potent in the class of drugs. It's highly addictive, highly addictive. It appears like rocks or shards of glass or flake glass. It says often produced. All the methamphetamine produced in the United States is produced in these little clandestine home labs. In Mexico, they have full-blown pharmaceutical operations that look just like if you went to if you've ever driven over to Delaware, when you cross in there, Christiana, and you see that, I can't remember, it's Eli Lilly, one of them have a big pharmaceutical manufacturing plant in Mexico. They have those that look just like ours that mass produce methamphetamine and ecstasy. But in this country, it's all done in these little clandestine home labs. Abusers of methamphetamine. We don't have a meth problem here. We have our own problems in this area. Meth's not one of them, but I'm going to tell you about meth anyway. They often have dental issues because of the caustic chemicals. Often, whenever they find people abusing meth, there's 2 items that they always find on them, meth abusers. One is coloring books, the adult coloring books, because they're up for days, so they're just coloring. The other thing that they find on them is artifacts. They dig. They're all Indiana Jones because they're up all night or they're up for 2 or 3 days, so that they're looking for sharks' teeth and arrowheads, just digging because the looking for the artifacts keeps them occupied. Because they're on 2 and 3 days where they're going straight with no sleep. So ecstasy is a mixture of amphetamine and a hallucinogen, or methamphetamine is also included. Ecstasy originally came out in the 80s, and it was originally used by psychotherapists as it's kind of like a truth serum, because when you take ecstasy, you tend to kind of bury your soul there. So psychoanalysts were using it. However, the negative effects that surrounded the drug, there were so many negatives with using it that it became listed as a Schedule I drug. Schedule I drugs have no medical use. They are illegal on a federal level. It means you're not allowed to possess it, distribute it, manufacture it. They don't even want you looking at it, okay? The thing about ecstasy, when you hear about people overdosing on ecstasy, a lot of young people like to use ecstasy. Sometimes you hear it as X or Molly, or there's a lot of names for it. The way ecstasy, people who overdose on ecstasy, you would think because of the amphetamine, methamphetamine, that they have a heart attack, but it's not. When people overdose on ecstasy, one of the things that ecstasy does is the portion of your brain that regulates your body temperature it affects that, and it goes cattywampus. So your body temperature is no longer regulated, and your temperature will just go up and up and up, and you have a fever over 106, and you literally fry your brain. So amphetamine, methamphetamine, ecstasy can be taken orally or in a pill. It can be snorted, rubbed on the gums, smoked, crushed up, smoked in a pipe or a soda can or light bulbs. It can be ejected. It can be mixed with oils and smoked in vape pens or e-cigarettes. Every one of these substances that we're going to talk about today is available in an oil to be used in a vape pen. These are some of the paraphernalia that's associated with ecstasy. You know, he's got the syringe, methamphetamine. Methamphetamine, unlike cocaine, when you smoke crack, you know, it tends to burn quickly. Methamphetamine doesn't, so that's why oftentimes they will use the light bulb kind of thing here, because the smoke, you can keep it heated for a long time, and the smoke stays in it. The bowl, they often call it a chicken bone. There's a specific bong that's used for ecstasy or methamphetamine. It's called a quag, and that's made for the high heat that's used to smoke amphetamines, methamphetamine. These are some of the street names. Some of the signs and symptoms that we see associated with someone who's using amphetamines: dilated pupils, hyperexcitability. I'm just glossing over some of them. Inability to concentrate, aggressive behavior, the inability to sleep. Some of the workplace indicators that you're going to see if somebody's abusing amphetamines is the inability to concentrate, jitters, careless behavior. They'll have angry outbursts. They'll be awake 2 or 3 days, and when they're coming down off of it, they're like Rip Van Winkle. They'll sleep for 2 or 3 days. Meth mouth. That comes from using methamphetamine. Those people had normal teeth before they started using methamphetamine. The chemicals in methamphetamine are so caustic that it actually rots their teeth away. One of the police departments in the Pacific Northwest, they did this thing called the Faces of Meth. It's online. And they took people's mug shots to show you how devastating methamphetamine is on just the total being. So they took the mugshots. This particular young lady, that was 1.5 years after using meth. Some of the other people here, you can see it's very devastating. Some of these people were using for a while, but some of these people, especially in that second row, them 2 gentlemen in the middle, 6 and 7 months. They don't even look, and that poor woman in that upper right-hand corner, bless her heart. So methamphetamine manufacturing is extremely dangerous. The chemicals are very caustic. They damage the central nervous system, the liver, the kidneys. They burn or irritate the skin, eyes, nose, and throat. The chemicals in 12 states that do have a problem with methamphetamine. If you own a property and you want to rent it out, you're the renter or the rentee, you're the person going to rent it, you have to get a meth certificate. You have to actually bring a company in that comes in and they scan the property to make sure nobody's cooked meth in there. Because if someone's cooked meth in the property, it's not safe for human habitation. So the property's condemned. So you have to get a meth certificate to show that the property is safe to cohabitate or live in. It's estimated that every pound of methamphetamine that's produced leaves 5 to 7 pounds of toxic waste behind. They're very dangerous. I'm going to show you some pictures of some meth labs. So you can see not exactly what we would call FDA stamp of approval. Just even the chemicals that they're using. I mean, I don't know where they got that can of ether, but that looks like it got bought that before World War II. But they're actually, and you can see the cleanliness level of the mixing process here. Again, doesn't look like something I'd want to use that was produced. Right, I don't know what that red stuff is. But you see they got the fire extinguisher nearby. I don't know that that's really going to help too much. That poor man's got to go in there and break down a meth lab. So that's like, you know, decontamination suit there. Yeah. Well, That's why. So the next drug I'm going to talk about is cocaine. So cocaine is a white powder. It comes from the coca plant in South America. It's extracted and it's manufactured into the powder or the paste that we normally see in the U.S. Most of the cocaine comes in through Southern California and Texas. The crack that we have in the United States, crack is where you take the powdered cocaine and you mix it with some baking soda and some other ammonia and some other solvents. I'm not going to give you a recipe to cook crack, but you can go on YouTube. There's about 200 different videos that show you how to cook crack and make the best, mix it up and see how it comes back. All of the crack that you find in the U.S. was made in the U.S. The powdered cocaine comes in and then it's formed into crack. It can be snorted, it can be injected, it can be smoked, be rubbed on the gums. People put it in a Visine bottle and add it to eye drops. It can be induced into the rectum. That's becoming more popular. It's called butt rockets. People who snort cocaine tend to burn their septum out so they can't snort anymore. And people who shoot cocaine inject themselves so many times that oftentimes they don't have any veins left. So you got two ways you can go. It's either the eye drops or the butt rocket, and the butt rocket seems to give you a better buzz. So, and then of course it can be mixed with oil or smoked in a vape pen or an e-cigarette. Paraphernalia you see associated with it, of course, the razor blades, the rolled up dollar bills, the little folded bundles, the little tiny vials with the screw-on lid, some street names for cocaine. Some of the signs and symptoms you see, people are talkative, argumentative, they get massive bursts of energy, extreme joy, racing heart rate, feeling of euphoria. I don't know why that's offline. Anyway, again, short-term use causes them sometimes have twitches, vertigo, tremors, the paranoia. As they continue to use cocaine, one of the things associated with cocaine use, high doses and prolonged use, are paranoia. And paranoia associated with cocaine use cannot be taken lightly. I'm going to tell you all two stories that I know personally about cocaine. So many years ago, I used to work in an emergency room. It's back in probably early 90s. And we had what was called the psych room. So the psych room was a room directly across from the nurse's station. It had a door with a window just like that one right there and had the punch and key code to get in. In that room were two chairs that were bolted down to the floor, jailhouse style, one for the doctor, one for the patient. And then a place where if they needed to, handcuff, secure the person, it was very jailhouse style, to the floor. Okay? So the police brought this guy in, completely disoriented, out of his mind, whatever, took him in, brought him in the psych room, put him in there. About 15 minutes later, the doctor went over to go in to evaluate him, punched in the key code, opened the door. He turned around, he was like, "There's nobody in here." The gentleman had climbed up in the ceiling, barricaded himself in the interstitial area. It took them 5 hours to get him out. He was barricaded in there, convinced that the DEA and his ex-wife were down there trying to get him. I do private testing in addition to workplace testing. We get private testing. So probably about maybe 7 years ago, this gentleman had come to us for drug testing. He was court ordered for drug testing and anger management. I don't do the anger management, but we do the drug testing. So he was this little, mild, meek man, come in, and he had to come in. He would call and had to come in 2 or 3 times a week, and he came in. And after he was coming for about a year, we would all, every time he'd leave, we were like, "I wonder what he did." So I said, "You know what, I'm going to ask him," because he comes in so much, I'm going to ask him. So I asked him, I said, "Okay, give us the story. What's up that you got to have this drug testing and this anger management?" Because I couldn't even imagine this guy getting mad at anybody. He was so mild, meek. He said he was like a loan processor or something, did a white collar thing, worked in a cubicle, either wrote mortgages or loans or something. Anyway, he got addicted to cocaine. So he was having financial problems. He didn't attribute it to the cocaine use. He thought somebody was stealing his identity, and he was all paranoid about that. He was having marriage problems. He didn't attribute that to his cocaine use. He thought that people were calling his wife, telling lies. He was having problems at work. Of course, he didn't attribute it to the cocaine use. He thought his coworkers were trying to set him up. Well, what happened was a file that was not his file got put on his desk by mistake. So the gentleman worked down the hall, whose file it really was. All he did was walked in the cubicle, picked up his file, and was walking out. And our little guy came walking in and had a cup of scalding hot coffee in his hand and seen this guy in his office, thought he was trying to set him up, and threw the scalding coffee in his face. I couldn't get my mind around. I wish I had a video, because if you seen this guy, you would be like, nah. I could not get my mind around this guy doing that. And he told me, he said, I thank God every day all I have is that coffee. He said, because I could have killed him brutally with my bare hands. I could have shot him, stabbed him, beat him to death. He said, I had so much rage and anger inside of me at that very moment. It was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So it absolutely can trigger a paranoia that's on a whole nother level. Workplace indicators, they get a false sense of bravado and confidence. The bravado interferes with the coworkers. The confidence causes them to take a lot of risks. They disappear. People using cocaine, they're going to be gone every time you look for them, because the nature of cocaine, when you use cocaine, you start out, you're here, and whether you snort it, smoke it, shoot it, that first dose, you just go, and you're like 0 to 150. Well, depending on whether you snorted it, smoked it, or shoot it, you're going to come down 5, 7, 15, 20 minutes later, depending on how you used it. You're going to come off, or you feel like you came down. You really didn't, but you feel like you did. And you just keep kind of redose to re-replicate that first. Well, you can't get there because you're really already high, but you don't know it. So they keep redosing, and they'll keep going until they're out of cocaine or out of money or whatever comes first. So they are disappearing throughout the workday. They'll go in all kind of places to use coke. You never find them. You can't find them. Poor attention to detail. Again, the paranoia that can be violent. A lot of absenteeism, tardiness, forgetfulness. That's a picture of the coca plant. There's some crack. Some more crack. More. That's cocaine powder. It's just in like a rock form. That's some more crack. There's a vial of cocaine. There's a brick of cocaine. Another brick of cocaine. Another brick of cocaine. That's some crack. That's some crack. That's some crack. Crack. Cocaine pressed in like a pill. Marijuana. Now's the part where everybody's going to ask me the questions. All right, so marijuana comes from the cannabis sativa, the hemp plant, cannabis sativa. There are many chemicals in the marijuana plant, okay, including the cannabinol, the cannabidiol, the acids, all these chemicals in there, one of them being tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC, which is the stuff in marijuana that gets you high. Delta-9 THC. That's what we're specifically testing for on a drug test, is Delta-9 THC, okay? The reason that medical marijuana, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but before we get to that, the reason I'm going to tell you why medical marijuana is a bupkis bill of goods that everybody's been sold, because since 1982, there's been 2 products on the market that any physician in this country can legally prescribe. Marinol or dronabinol. They're Schedule III drugs. They've been legal. Anybody could get them. If you're an AIDS patient, if you have glaucoma, if you have kidney disease, if you have, cancer patient and you need the antiemetic properties, you could legally get Marinol or dronabinol in all 50 states, federally regulated, legal 100% since 1982. No questions asked, no problems to get it. It's been easily attainable for anybody and everybody. Now, 3 drugs come from the cannabis plant: marijuana, hashish, and hashish oil. Marijuana is a Schedule I drug. What that means is, from a federal level, it is a Schedule I drug. There is no physician in any of the 50 states, regardless of what the 50 states say, that can legally write a prescription for marijuana. These doctors make a recommendation that you use marijuana, but they cannot write a prescription for marijuana. Okay? I don't care what the state says. They cannot legally write a prescription for marijuana. In fact, when the DOT updated the panel in 2018, they also updated the definition of a prescription. So, cannabis is illegally cultivated indoor and outdoor to maximize THC content. That's the other problem. See, a lot of people say, well, I remember when, 15, 20 years ago, and I smoked marijuana in college. The marijuana of today is not the same marijuana. Up until about 2000, most marijuana had a high grade, had about 15% THC. Marijuana today has 30, 40, 50, 60% THC. We're not talking about the same marijuana. It's a Schedule I drug. 421 chemicals in a marijuana. Okay? When it's smoked, that number jumps to over 2,000. No reputable doctor is going to tell you to smoke something with that many carcinogens in it. Okay? It's addictive. Again, there's 50 to 70%. It has 50 to 70% more carcinogens than tobacco smoke. Commercial grade marijuana, again, it's telling you about the high amounts of THC in it. They have found traces of THC in some people up to 4.5 months after stopping because some of these high levels of THC that are out there. It's smoked. It can be put in teas. It can be put in all kind of stuff. It's added to other drugs. Some of the common paraphernalia that you see associated with it. Some of the street names for it. Signs and symptoms that you see. We all know that they have the impaired reactions, the decreased memory, the munchies that people laugh about. It impairs your driving, makes it difficult decision making, impairs your ability to follow moving objects, distorts time. NIDA got together with National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, and they did a study, several studies. They brought in people who never smoked marijuana, people who smoke marijuana occasionally, and people who are hardcore everyday marijuana smokers. And they brought them in, and they put them on a driving simulator. Light comes on, hit the brake. Light comes on, hit the brake. They wrote down everybody's time. Then they gave everybody marijuana, and they retested them. Not some, not many, not most. Every single person had a difference in their time after smoking marijuana from before smoking marijuana. Some people went from 0.03 seconds to 1.2 seconds. And I'm sure the officers can tell you 1.2 seconds to hit the brake when you veered into the wrong lane is deadly. The FAA did a study. The FAA took 9 pilots, brought them in, put them on a flight simulator, gave them 1 joint, tested them 15 minutes later, 4 hours later, 8 hours later, 24 hours later, and 48 hours later. 24 hours later, 7 of the 9 pilots still showed impairment on the flight simulator. 6 of the 7 pilots weren't even aware that they were still showing impairment on the flight simulator. 6 to 11% of fatal accident victims tested positive for marijuana. We just put a story up on the White Glove page, Facebook page, about in Colorado, there's been a 300% increase in the amount of fatal accidents, and all of those people tested positive for marijuana. So those are directly related to marijuana use. All of the states that have legalized or quote unquote legalized, decriminalized marijuana, particularly the ones with the recreational marijuana, the rate of accidents and fatal accidents has jumped. They said that right now in Colorado, based on this information, every 2 days somebody's dying in a car accident that has marijuana in their system. Again, the short-term memory, the bloodshot eyes, we all know about this stuff. Okay, so marijuana wax. So marijuana with 50-60% THC, that wasn't good enough. Let's crank it up a notch or two. So now we have marijuana wax. So wax is where they take it and they do a procedure to it with some heat, and they make this, bring this substance out, pull this substance out of it that's called wax. Most wax samples have 90% THC content. 90% THC content. It's called butane hash oil because it is actually like the hash oil, but they extract it purposefully. You'll hear people, like with marijuana, you hear 420, 420, you always see 420, you hear 420. The wax people think they're slick, they're calling 710 now because that's oil upside down. So if you see 710, raise your antennas. It could be used in a bong. You dab it, you need a dab ring, or you can put it in an e-cigarette or a vape pen and vaporize it with your little vape pen. Passive inhalation, I already talked about this. The cutoff levels are set high enough that even if you're around people smoking marijuana, you're not going to test positive, okay, unless you actually partake of the marijuana, then you're going to have a problem. So the hemp problem. There are a lot of substances out there that are contain hemp. Now, this is the big problem, and I'm going to talk about CBD oils in a second. They came out with these substances in the early 2000s, and then the FDA said, no, you can't have them. And then the hemp lobby came back, and then the FDA said, okay, you can have them with warning labels. So they put warning labels on them that say, warning may cause a positive for drug tests. Now, it would always cause a positive on the screening, because the screening we're just testing for cannabinoids. But then when it went to the lab, it usually, most of the time, didn't contain THC. However, a few of them, we had one, Hempola 2, this salad oil, that had like 398 nanograms of THC in a teaspoon of it. So yeah, you would test positive, but most of them you wouldn't. However, because of all the legalized marijuana and all the CBD oils and all the stuff going on, the people that manufacture these hemp products have gotten emboldened. So they're not worrying about it now. They're just filling them with THC. So the medical review officer is not going to accept this as a medically legitimate reason. And there is evidence now of people, we always tell people, don't use these hemp products. For every one of these hemp products, there's one just like it that doesn't contain hemp, that whoever the holistician or the nutritionist, whoever told you take it, tell them you're in a drug-free workplace, you can't take it. Because there were a lot of these products that, again, you might test positive on screening, confirmation you'd be negative, but now they're actually containing THC. We have evidence of people who have been using a certain tea or a certain whatever for many years, and they've been drug tested, they've been in a drug-free workplace, never had a problem. Now all of a sudden, guess what? They're coming up positive. Because if I'm selling a tea, right, and it don't have THC in it, it's just a hemp tea, okay, and then he's selling a tea that his tea is marketed the same, but he's got THC in his, who do you think is going to sell more tea? So the DOT has published several notices concerning marijuana, medical marijuana. It is a Schedule I drug. It cannot legally be prescribed. It is not acceptable. Now, for you non-DOT people in the room, bummer, because guess what? The Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988, and I may have a slide here to talk about it. Boom, look at that. Prohibits the use of Schedule I drugs in the workplace. So if Queen Anne's County gets any federal funding, they are bound to follow the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988 or forego the funding. So I'm going to give you guys 3 guesses which side of the coin the county came down on. They're going to follow the Drug-Free Workplace Act in 1988, which means they cannot allow Schedule I substances in the workplace, which would include marijuana, medical marijuana, or any version of it. Guess what? CBD oils are Schedule I drugs. A lot of people don't know that. They've been decriminalized in 37 states, but this week, 4 states pulled back that decriminalization and said, nah, they're Schedule I, and if you get caught with them, you're in big trouble. CBD oil is a Wild West roulette, Russian roulette out here. There is zero regulation of CBD oils, okay? People manufacture them. they are testing them and finding them with anywhere between 5 to 40% THC. There is no way to know. They'll tell you on the label it's THC or it's CBD oil. It doesn't contain any THC, but you have no way to know that because there's nobody regulating it. There's no quality control. You know how you find out that it had THC in it? When you fail a drug test. I do consulting for another county, and there was a school bus driver, and school bus drivers in the state of Maryland, if they test positive, they get decertified for 10 years. So in addition to the regular DOT stipulations, they're decertified from driving a school bus in the state of Maryland under Maryland Code Law for 10 years. So it's a serious business, right? This poor gentleman was 69 years old, and he got the CBD oil from this holistic guy that swore to him on a stack of Bibles that there was no THC in this CBD oil. And guess what? He tested positive. And he tested positive, the cutoff's 15. This man tested positive for over 300 nanograms of THC in his system. And he wasn't drinking it by the gallon. He was using it as the guy told him. And the guy swore to him it didn't contain any THC. But guess what? It did. So I'm just telling you guys, if you're thinking about CBD oil, just be prepared. Because if you test positive, the MRO will not accept that as a medically legitimate explanation. The only exception to that is Epidiolex. Epidiolex is an approved CBD oil. But here's the thing with Epidiolex. Epidiolex has less than 0.3% THC in it. And we know that for a fact because Epidiolex is actually manufactured in a legitimate pharmaceutical by a provider where they test it and regulate it. Epidiolex has been prescribed for treatment of 2 seizure disorders. So that's how you get Epidiolex. There are physicians that are writing it off-label. Off-label means they're writing it for headaches or all these other things. However, if you go online and read about Epidiolex, you know what you're going to see people saying? Don't bother, it don't work. No, it doesn't work because it's not made to get you high. It's made to keep children from having seizures because a lot of times the medications that are normally prescribed, the therapy for seizures, children can't take. So it's very effective in that. Is it going to get you high? Are you going to feel good? No, you're not. That is the only CBD oil. Go ahead.
What about the people that are taking this? Because I've seen a lot of people take it not for the purpose of getting high necessarily, but for relaxing. They call it relaxation purposes or back issues.
Right. Well, the reason, I know, well, I'm just telling you, you know why they're feeling that it's making their back feel better? Because it's about 10, 15, 20, 25% THC in there. Yeah, I guess it does. Well, the problem is here's the real problem is I don't know if y'all ever watch any old Westerns, but you ever seen the guy pull up in the medicine cart with the snake oil? That's literally, I say snake oil, it's not fun, but it is. It claims, back then, they would sell this stuff and they would claim it eliminated all these problems. And guess what? It was just pure booze. It was just alcohol. It was like 95% alcohol. Of course you felt better. Yeah, but I guess my headache did go away, right? Of course you felt better. The problem is that the reason that the FDA doesn't give approval to this stuff, just like marijuana, in order to get approval from the FDA, you have to be able to prove that it's actually effective in treating the condition for what you claim it has effective properties. They have done study after study after study after study. There is absolutely zero proof that even THC is effective in pain management. You ever heard that story about, oh, wow, my tooth really hurts, and it's like, here, let me bang you on the toe with a hammer because you'd be so worried about your toe, you're going to, yeah, you're so high you forgot about it. It doesn't really work on pain. It has no analgesic properties. Physiologically, it doesn't work on pain. What it does is it has psychoactive properties that make you kind of forget about it. But, so,
What about the lotions?
Well, again, with the lotions, it depends on how much THC is in there because you can absorb drugs through your skin. So you do have to be concerned about that. And there is nothing to regulate what is going in these products. It's right now, I mean, hopefully at some point the FDA put out a warning about CBD oils, and they said for a patient safety standpoint that they do not recommend you use them. They do not recommend you try. The only ones that they will recommend is Epidiolex, and you have to get it through a prescription. People recommending this, listen, in the early 1900s, they recommended cocaine like this. If I pulled some of the advertising from the early 1900s, they were telling you that cocaine was the be-all, end-all. It was going to alleviate headaches and your back pain, and it would make you relax. It would make you go to sleep. Now, we all know that's not going to happen, right? You feel better. But then they realized the medical effects of that were not cool. So, okay, same thing in the 30s and 40s, amphetamines. They were actually pushing amphetamines for children in the 30s and 40s, telling you take it, oh, it'll make your kid concentrate, it'll make your kid behave, it gets rid of headaches, it makes you feel better. And then they realize this is not good. There's too much negative. So right now, if you want to use CBD oils, everybody in here, it's a free country. You're welcome to put whatever you want to in your body. There are consequences. And if you test positive, you will be terminated because it is a zero tolerance. Now, as far as the danger, every day you read stories. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, February 14th, somebody thought it was funny and baked some kind of baked goods on Valentine's Day and took it into an elementary school that had CBD oil, and 28 students got taken to the hospital with nausea and vomiting and anxiety. So, and that's just like with the edibles, which I'm going to talk about them in a second. The edibles. In the states where marijuana's been quote unquote legalized, you have these edible formulas that you can buy, edibles. In 2014, we had a drug testing conference in Denver. They specifically selected Denver because they had legalized recreational marijuana. And we went to a pot store, right? They had the whole wall of all the different varieties of pots, and then the whole other wall was just edibles. Now, I happen to love Swedish fish aficionado. And right up there on the counter, right next to the register, where you got to pay cash, was a bowl of fish, Swedish fish. Same little fins, same little eyes. I mean, I know Swedish fish. Now, if I hadn't been in a pot store, I might have been apt to take one and eat it. But I knew I was in a pot store, and I was like, right? But you know what? If I'm a kid, I don't know that that's THC laced. And when we're talking about high levels of THC in these edibles, the week that we were out there, every single night on the news, you would hear about overdoses. In fact, when we came back from the pot store, there was a guy laying right out in front of the hotel that the doormen were waiting for 911 because people were coming there, they're eating edibles and they're not feeling anything right away, and they're eating edibles and they're not feeling anything right away. And so then they start smoking pot, and then all of a sudden, all of it hits you at once. And you can overdose on THC. Now, with regards to the edibles, some of my colleagues in these states where it's legal, they've now had the problem of people thinking it's cute and funny to bring these edibles in and set them in the break room. So you have people who are testing positive for marijuana, THC, and they're swearing they didn't use no drugs, and the employer believes them. However, what are you going to do? So I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just telling you, if you don't know where it came from in this day and age, you better not eat it, because there have been people who have lost their, and you know what? The county can't say, okay, I believe you, I'm gonna make an exception, because then guess what? Every single pothead all of a sudden got slipped edibles by that they didn't know, unknowingly. And the MRO will tell you, I don't care if it's a purposeful or accidental ingestion, I'm just going by what I see. You don't have a valid explanation for this, and I have no choice but to report it as positive. And again, I can think of at least 15 examples that I've heard of directly from my colleagues of people who have had edibles in the workplace and people think it's funny. In fact, one of them, this is not, I mean, it's not funny. It was actually in a courthouse. They had a luncheon. So it was like they were feeding it to like judges and people working in the courthouse and state's attorneys, and right, and they were all drug-free workplace, and people were coming up positive, and they knew these people weren't, but it's not funny, you know. And again, like I said, they slipped it in this school, and these kids got a bad reaction. So here's some pictures of marijuana. Marijuana brick. Some little marijuana. There's these bowls, these joints, these little jars of marijuana. There's the hemp wine. There's the hemp sodas. Hemp shots. Look, red or white, $2.50. Hemp tea. Look, cannabis. Hemp lip balm. There's wax. That's what wax looks like. There's the guy dabbing. That's his dab rig, and he's going along with his wax. All right, opiates. So opiates, when we talk about opiates, there's opiates and opioids. Opiates are the natural. The natural ones are what come from the poppy. That's morphine, codeine, thebaine. They come from the poppy plant. Opioids are semi-synthetic. That's where they take it and they synthesize it through a chemical process. And heroin is actually an opioid. Hydrocodone, Vicodin, all these are semi-synthetic, okay? Heroin is a Schedule I drug. Heroin is totally making a comeback, obviously, because more and more people have become addicted to prescription opiates, and they can't get the supply, they can't keep up the supply, the doctor cuts them off, they can't break into enough sheds to pay for it, so they're going to jump to heroin. Heroin is very cheap. It's also a lot purer than it used to be, which makes it a lot more appealing because a lot of people think, oh, okay, well, you can smoke heroin now, I'll smoke it. I'm not a junkie, I'm not shooting it, I'll smoke it. And they rationalize it that, it ain't that bad, it's good, I can, use it, it's not that bad. Pure heroin is rarely sold on the street, obviously. It's getting cut with a lot of things. It used to be, though, heroin at one time, it would get cut with, sugar, starch, acetaminophen, all these kind of things. But now people are using the F word, fentanyl. See, if I'm a heroin dealer, I got my brick of heroin over here. I can buy a brick of fentanyl for dirt cheap. Dirt cheap. Now, I could mix some cornstarch in with my heroin and sell it, but people that buy it, they're gonna come back and be like, man, you're bogus. Your heroin's cut up. It ain't all that. You're weak. It's weak. But if I throw some fentanyl in there, you still gonna get the bang. Now I'm getting double. I'm getting double my sales, and people like my stuff. However, guess what? I'm not a chemist. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm gonna show you fentanyl in a minute, and you'll see why it's so dangerous. So oxycodone, this is synthesized out of thebaine. They take the thebaine part out, and we know, oxycodone is a problem. And then they tried to make the OxyContin, which they said was a time release. So they put the time release in it so that people couldn't, because you could crush it. You can crush it up and snort it, or you could crush it up and shoot it and get like a nice buzz from it. And so they put the time release ingredient in it, so you didn't get the buzz off of it. But of course, people who use drugs are very ingenious, and somebody realized, you know what, if you microwave it, the time release buffer is destroyed, and now guess what? Boom! If they would just put that energy into doing something positive, huh? So poppy seeds, I've already talked about it, that the level's set high enough that the MRO knows. So how are opiates used? They're orally in a pill, smoked in a powder, snorted in a powder. They can be injected in a liquid, mixed with oil, used in vape pens. That includes heroin. You see needles, syringes, the small pieces of aluminum foil. I tell you, smoke heroin. Some of the street names. Signs and symptoms. That's one of the first signs you can tell somebody's using opiates. Okay, they will start nodding out. That's the first sign you can tell. I mean, you see this other stuff, the itching. Another sign when you start seeing people with a whole lot of sores, or face looks like it's all broken out, chest and the lower arms, because when you use it, you start itching, and they start keep picking. But that's sleeping right there, because you use so much that you're just, and they'll nod out. They're constantly start nodding out. Hopefully nobody looks like that in your workplace, but. So again, these are some of the indicators. One of the people, I told you that those guys that failed the DOT drug test and had to go back and get the safety concern letter, or they didn't actually fail, they had a prescription, but they had to go back and get fitness for duty and got disqualified for not reporting those medicines. One of those gentlemen was taking pretty good bit of Percocet. He went back to the medical examiner for his fitness for duty. She asked him to count backwards from 99 to 90, and he couldn't do it. NIDA estimates that 1 in 4 people are abusing their prescription drugs. Most of these people, more than half of them, become addicted through legitimate prescription use that a physician prescribed. Up until 2014, Vicodin was what's known as a Schedule III drug. Now, a Schedule III drug means a doctor can call it in, right? In 2014, they changed it to a Schedule II. Well, what's the difference? Well, a Schedule II drug, you have to have a physical written prescription with no refills, has to have exact directions that you take to the pharmacy. Every Schedule II drug that's written by every doctor in this country, the pharmacies send them to Atlanta, to the drug diversion unit, and they have a warehouse where they keep every copy in the doctor's file of all the Schedule II prescriptions. So once they changed it, the doctors were like, you know what, I don't want the DEA diversion guy going, bring Dr. Who's file out here, and here comes the forklift. They didn't want that. So they stopped writing. So the written number of prescriptions dropped by 79% from 2014 to 2015. But up until that point, hydrocodone was the #1 prescribed drug in the United States. Not only going back to 2010, but actually going back to 2007. It was the #1 prescribed drug in the United States, more than simvastatin, that's your cholesterol medicines, more than lisinopril, right, blood pressure medicines. Believe it or not, more than Viagra. #1 drug written in the United States. We have 5% of the world's population, and we consume 99% of the world's hydrocodone. We consume 85% of the oxycodone in the world, and 80% of new heroin users start by jumping over from prescription opiates. So fentanyl. Now, I started talking a little bit earlier about fentanyl. Fentanyl is 80 to 100 times stronger than morphine. Most of the fentanyl that comes in here comes in, smuggled in, Chinese fentanyl that gets smuggled in, or fentanyl that's produced in these clandestine laboratories down here in Mexico and comes in, right? But the problem with fentanyl is that's a lethal dose. So if I'm not a pharmacist and I'm not a chemist and I'm just buying some fentanyl to cut my heroin with, you can see why it's a problem. But guess what's a bigger problem? Carfentanil. Carfentanil is 10,000 times more potent than morphine and 100 times more potent than fentanyl. Carfentanil, if somebody overdoses on carfentanil, you can give them Narcan after Narcan after Narcan. It doesn't work. It's so powerful. Carfentanil is the one, law enforcement can tell you, this is the one where people are always really afraid of fentanyl and getting around it and touching it. But carfentanil, you literally, just breathing it in, can get extremely sick and overdose. Carfentanil is extremely dangerous. That's a lethal dose of carfentanil. So just to give you a visual image, that's a lethal dose of heroin, pure heroin. That's a lethal dose of fentanyl, and the last one is a lethal dose of carfentanil. 2 states have a carfentanil overdose, highest carfentanil overdose issue in the nation. One is New Hampshire. Guess what the second one is? You got it, the old line state. There's some black tar heroin. There's some, they wrapped it all, make it look like some vanilla sticks, right? Black tar heroin. Black tar. More black tar. There's some powdered heroin. There's some heroin been pressed into some rocks. There's little bags of heroin. Or little bags of heroin. Hopefully you ain't opening somebody's desk drawer and finding something that looks like that. PCP. So PCP was originally, it started out, it's a Schedule I drug. It's a Schedule I drug. So far for Schedule I, we got marijuana, we got heroin, we got ecstasy, we got methamphetamine, and now we got PCP. And we have CBD oils, and now we got PCP. So PCP, started out in the 50s, before they even had the FDA, the group that approved drugs, started out, they came up with this stuff and they said, hey, we've got this awesome anesthesia that we're going to use, and it's wonderful. You guys are going to love it. And they said, okay. So they used it. And the people went under, and they had the surgery, and they were fine. And then they put them in the recovery room. People in there screaming, trying to rip their eyes out. And they were like, no, you're not using this. So it got made Schedule 2. Veterinarians were the only ones that were using it. Veterinarians said, hey, it clearly has good anesthetic properties. We have large animals we need to anesthetize that sometimes we can't find something that works. It seems to work. We're going to use it. Well, in 1982, all the veterinarians in the U.S. discontinued using it because anytime any dog had received PCP as part of their anesthesia, they had to be put down because they became psychotic. So it's available in every region of the country. It's mostly produced in clandestine laboratories in Los Angeles. Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area has the 3rd highest PCP rate positive in the country. We may not have a meth problem, but we sure enough got a heroin, marijuana, cocaine, and PCP problem. My colleagues around the country, they're always like, why is the DOT still testing for PCP? I'm like, I had 17 PCP positives last year. It can be snorted, swallowed, smoked, injected. It can be mixed with eye drops, right? Visine bottle. They take transdermal patches, them Nicoderm patches to quit smoking, soak them in PCP liquid, pop it on your arm, going right on in the workplace. It can be added to vape pens or e-cigarettes. Now, somebody got the bright idea because back in the 70s, see, PCP is really a powder, but it can be easily converted into a liquid with some denatured alcohol, right? So, okay. Somebody said, hey, let's spray it on parsley flakes, and that's where you got angel dust, right? You know, greens, right? And then somebody in the 80s was like, why are we spraying it on parsley? Spray it on marijuana. And then you got your Love Boat and your Lovely and all that. Well, now people are like, wait a minute, why am I spraying it, period? Let's just drink the juice. Let's drink the liquid. That's a joint that's been dipped in some PCP. Some of the paraphernalia you might see associated with it. Some of the street names. Okay, PCP, of course, it is an anesthetic with all these hallucinogens mixed in. So when you see PCP and you always see the people with like what you think the superhuman strength, it's not that it makes you stronger, it makes you numb. So if you went over to pick up a car, you would feel pain, you would stop, but somebody with PCP, they don't feel no pain, so they don't stop. That same emergency room I used to work in, so one time they brought this guy in, PCP, right? Well, when they first brought him in, he was like kind of comatose a little bit. They brought him in, he was just blank stare, didn't blink. It was weird. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. Didn't blink, silent, just sitting there. And it was funny because they lifted his arm up and it stayed. And they lifted him over and they put him on the bed, right across from the nurse's station, regular bed, not the psych room, a bed. And they tied him up with some restraints, tied him down just in case, you know, because you never know, people are unpredictable. And he was cool for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. And all of a sudden, like the whole hospital, you could just hear these blood-curdling screams coming out of this guy. It was just like, everybody was just like, what? And he was just, Wah! And then all of a sudden, boom, boom, he just ripped them restraints like they were paper, okay? It took, I don't know how many, it was security guards, x-ray techs, a couple of the physician's assistants, a couple cops. It must have been 15 people it took to subdue this guy. Get him back in there. They were like, all right, we're going to put the leather restraints on him. Now, I don't know if y'all ever seen leather restraints, but they're leather with these metal stays in them, like gauntlets, right? They were like, he can't get out of these. Strapped him all down. Like, wasn't even 5 minutes. Boom, boom. Well, when he did it, he broke both of the bones in both arms. It was coming through the sea. He was swinging them things around like weapons. He didn't feel nothing. I wish that was on a film. You could show that to people, because if you seen that, you would be like, why anybody would smoke PCP? So they do have, you know, the numbness. They get the violent behavior, the paranoia. The paranoia that's associated with people using PCP is a level of psychosis, psychotic. Again, short-term effects, it affects their temperature. That's why a lot of times if you ever seen some of the videos, World Wildest Police videos or something, they're always running around naked, like charging the police car naked, you know, because they take their clothes off because they feel hot. It kind of, in the same way that ecstasy affects the brain, they kind of get these hot flashes, right? Personal summer. Long-term effects include memory loss, depression, weight loss, mood disorders. While they're using, of course, you can see they got some blurred vision, eye fluttering, drooling. That guy, he was, not only did he not blink, he was drooling. He was drooling, I remember that. So they have a high accident potential, loss of coordination, they're combative, hostile, violent behavior. You could see why you wouldn't want this in the workplace. There's some PCP liquid and some PCP powder. It's PCP powder. There's PCP that's been pressed into pills. That's a cigarello or whatever, more cigarette been dipped in. There's some PCP powder. So again, Queen Anne's County has a zero tolerance policy. Y'all get a 5-minute break. We're in the home stretch. Woo! Okay, so this last part, this is the most important part of the presentation and the reason you guys are here today, because this is going to talk about a couple things. First of all, I mean, anybody can recognize when somebody comes into the workplace impaired, right? If I see somebody walking in like this, I don't have to be, I mean, Stevie Wonder could know this guy's impaired, right? The problem is, by the time somebody comes into the workplace visibly showing signs like that, they're in the late stages of their use. The disease has progressed to the late stages. So I'm going to try to give you guys some tools to recognize the early stages, because if you get somebody in the early stages, they're still in the use stage, because there's 3 stages. There's use, abuse, and addiction. Use and abuse, the employee can still turn it around. By the time they get to addiction, they're one of them 26.4 million people. The only way they're turning that around is by getting admitted to a hospital and going through a whole round of rehab, and even then, there's, you know, not a real good success rate. Okay, so we want to get people before they get to that level. So I'm going to try to give you the tools to recognize the early signs and symptoms of an employee using. The other thing I want you to take away from today is that, again, as I said earlier, we're not trying to nail people's hide to the barn door. We're not trying to just scoop up people so we can apply the zero tolerance policy. Okay? We're talking about safety and fitness for duty. That's what this whole thing is about. And again, if you get somebody in the early stages, it may be where you call them in to have that "I'm concerned about you" conversation, not necessarily to go for a drug test, but "I'm concerned about you." And the employee still has a choice at this point to turn it around. They could say, you know what, my job is more important than what I'm doing, and let me straighten myself up and turn it around. Even in the abuse stage, sometimes when you call people in and say this "I'm concerned about you" talk, they still can turn it around. Okay, so I want to give you the tools for that. The other thing is, again, as I said, everybody can recognize somebody high in the workplace. The problem is getting supervisors to actually act on that, because most people see it and they don't want to act on it. But if you think that you can just turn your head and it's going to get better, or ignore it, it's not going to get better. It's totally going to get worse. Okay? And a lot of times I get the call after something bad happened, and then I don't want to call it a debriefing, but when you're trying to get to the bottom of, you know, okay, the bad thing happened, we've dealt with that, and then it's like, well, let's talk about some of the things the employee was doing before up to this point. And it'll be like, I could pull slides out and be like, check, check, check. I mean, all the warning signs were there. The employee was pretty much coming through the workplace with a banner saying, I need, you know, some kind of help here, and nobody would act on it. So that's what I'm trying to make you understand. Again, we're not trying to police. We're trying to get people the help that they need, and trying to get people to turn that ship around before it's too late. Now, in some cases, they have crossed over to the level of addiction, and in that case, now it's purely safety, and we need to get them out of the workplace before they hurt themselves or someone else, and get them where they need to be in some kind of help or treatment. If you ever talk to somebody that's been through addiction, they'll tell you a couple things. Number one, they'll tell you they're amazed how many people saw them in the midst of their mess and didn't do anything. They said they had to see me like that. They had to know. And what that says to them, they already have a low self-esteem. They have self-esteem issues. And what that says is, you don't care, and if you don't care that I'm using, I don't care that I'm using. It says to me, I'm not worth the time of your day to take 2 seconds to come to me and say, are you all right? Because something don't look right. They said they had to know, they had to see me, but nobody said anything. Other people will say, the best thing that ever happened to me was the day I got caught. In fact, I told y'all I do prison ministry, and I can't tell you how many of the ladies that I do ministry with, they say, I know this is going to sound crazy, but the best thing that ever happened to me was coming to prison because it made me change what I was doing. And I'd probably be dead right now but for that. And I wouldn't wish anybody going to prison, but if that'll straighten you out and pull you out of your mess, that's what it is. The other thing about addiction is like a road, and every step that they take down the road, when they finally do decide they're going to straighten up, they got to walk all them steps back. There's no magic bullet, no magic pill that's going to pick you up and put you back into normalcy. You have to walk that whole way back. So the further you let somebody go down the road to addiction, the harder it is for them to come back. That's why if you can get somebody in the use or abuse, they really got a chance to turn it around. Once they're down the road to addiction, it just seems hopeless. They feel like they're just floating on a raft out in the middle of the ocean. They don't even see dry land. What's the point? I don't even see my way out of this. So that's what I'm going to try to make y'all take away from this today. So in the early phases, oh, you know what? Let me back up real quick and define here use, abuse, and whatever. So use is where you take a substance, alcohol or prescription drug or illicit substance, in the prescription higher dose than what you were prescribed, or you're using illicit drugs, or you're using alcohol more than you should. You're using it, right? Abuse is where you continue using it despite negative effects. You got a DUI and you're still drinking, right? Got called in to work, you got called in the office and written up, for something was related to your drug use, and you're like, whatever, and you still keep using. Okay, you're still continuing, you're abusing. Addiction is now where you're chemically dependent on alcohol or drugs. You cannot stop by choice. You no longer have a choice in the matter. The only way you're going to get off of this is through medical intervention, and even then, it's not looking good on rehab. So we don't want anybody to get to the addiction point. So again, in the early phases, and this is where I want you to try to look. Because in the early phases, people are going to use to relieve tension. Their tolerance is going to start to increase. They might have some memory blackouts. They're lying about their use. You're going to see, what are you going to see? You're going to see decreased efficiency. You're going to see increased errors, and ding, 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 gold star award. The coworkers start complaining. The coworkers feel the brunt of it, so that's going to be the first sign for you. The visible signs, the person's making more mistakes. They're going to start missing deadlines. They're going to start coming in late. They're going to start being absent more than they used to. They're going to start overreacting to any criticism. They're going to start always complaining. They're always sick. They don't feel good. They got to leave early. Their stomach hurts. Their head hurts. They got a cold. That's why they didn't come to work yesterday, calling out. And lies. Lies, lies, lies. All kind of lies start piling on about everything. Okay? We all have our big circle of life, right? And in our circle, we got ourselves, we got our work, our family, our friends, our hobbies, our church, whatever we're into, all the stuff's in the circle. For somebody who's using drugs, the main focus of that circle is their drug or alcohol choice. That's it. Now, other things can stay in the circle in the early phase. I'll let some things in the circle, but I'm going to make a decision whether they stay in. Kind of the importance, I'm going to prioritize the things that perpetuate me to get high. They're going to get more priority in my circle. At the early stages, the other stuff's still in there, but the priority is going to be anything that's going to help me. If you're going to get me high, help me get high, finance my high, something related to my high, hey, you're priority. Okay? Well, I'm going to slough off in some other areas, so now I got to start lying about things. So lies are just coming everywhere, out of the woodwork. Now we start escalating because it's a disease. Drug dependence and alcohol dependence are diseases. The reason they're diseases is because they have a predictable progression. You will, if you don't stop using, enter the middle phase. Now in the middle phase, they're going to start sneaking their use. They're going to feel guilty about using. They're going to lose interest in things, and they're going to start becoming depressed. They got to sneak use because now their use is starting to cause problems. It's causing problems at home. They don't want nobody to know, so they start hiding the fact that they're using. They're hiding their drinking. They're hiding what they're using. You know, they used to openly do whatever. Now it's like they got grief about it, so now they're going to hide about doing it. Then they feel guilty when they do it. Right? They're starting to feel guilty because, you know they shouldn't be doing it, but you know what? I really got to do this, so I feel guilty about it. Loss of interest. Well, again, circle's starting to get smaller because the things that are on the periphery, I'm not worried about those no more. I've lost interest in those things. And now I feel depressed because the things that I used to get enjoyment out of, they don't even interest me no more. I see my coworkers over there, and they're all signing up for the March Madness pool, and everybody's having a good time, and everybody's having fun, and I could care less. I'm like so not interested in that. And I'm just like, geez, I used to love college basketball. Man, I was glued to the TV. I could care less about that right now. So I feel depressed. What kind of impact are you going to see? You're going to see increased warnings, increased family problems, increased financial problems, the repo man, garnishes, all this kind of stuff. What are you going to see on visible signs? Spasmodic workplace. Now we start entering the middle phase. We're going to have a spasmodic workplace. Let me explain that, because here we go. So I came in today, and all day long, because I was out all night doing my thing, so all day long I'm there just to punch in, but I ain't worth a fiddle. All day I'm just kind of going through the motions. And then I leave, and I'm like, man, Beverly saw me today. I know she saw me. I know she saw me just slacking off all day. Man, I got to shape up. I got to shape up. So I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I'm going to go in tomorrow. I'm going in now. Tomorrow's Thursday. I'm gangbusters, right? I'm in there. I'm doing reports. I'm like, Bev, you got anything for me to do? I'm just like, I'm doing it all, right? And Beverly's like, man, I was worried about her, but she seems all right. Well, now I just worked all day, and guess what? It's 5 o'clock. I'm like, hey, I did good today. I deserve a break. I ain't going to McDonald's. I'm going to my boys. I got to hook up because I deserve a break. Now I'm out all night getting high again, and then I come in Friday. Here comes fiddle again. Difficulty concentrating. Very undependable. Not at all dependable. It used to be Beverly could give me assignment. I did it. She didn't have to check up on it. It was done. She gave it to me. It's done. Now she gives it to me. It's like, did you do that? Huh? Well, you never gave it. I'm not dependable. She can't depend on me to do things. She can't even depend on me to come to work, because now I'm taking more days off, and I'm giving really vague reasons why I can't come in. And as the disease progresses, which it will, we get to the late middle phase. Now, the person's going to avoid discussion of any problems. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about anything. They don't want to talk about problems at home. They don't want to talk about problems at work. You can't even approach them. You can't talk to them. They don't want to talk about it. They can't control their use. They're absolutely using at work now. I can guarantee it. They're using. Or they're using right up to the minute they come in, and the very minute that they leave, it's the first thing they do. They don't care about food. They're completely isolated from others. That circle is so small now, there ain't nobody in this circle unless you can get me high, help me get high, finance my high. There is nothing, no room for you in the circle. They're at 30% of the efficiency that they were when you hired them. Increased disciplinary problems. They're probably in trouble with the law. They've either gotten a DUI or they've gotten arrested over here buying what they were buying where they shouldn't have been, doing whatever they were doing, or, breaking into sheds to finance this, or shoplifting, or writing bad checks, or whatever they might do to try to finance this high. Serious financial problems. You're going to see frequent time off. They'll go to lunch, they won't come back. They'll be aggressive, they'll be belligerent. Total loss of ethical values, they'll steal anything. I told the story of the last group, and this was true. This was another guy that came to me for private testing. He got addicted to opiates. He was a young guy in his 20s or whatever. He had been raised with this elderly lady that lived next to him, and this lady was his neighbor his whole life. She was like a grandmother to him. Knew her his whole life, like his grandmother. She got stomach cancer. He, of course, started dabbling in opiates and then got full-blown addict. Knew that she was getting dilaudid for the stomach cancer. So Mr. Benevolence volunteered to go over and cut her grass in the summertime. Now, of course, she thought it was because it's her adopted grandson. Of course, he wants to help her and cut her grass because she's sick and all, right? He wanted to cut the grass because when he was done, he wanted to get in the bathroom to wash his hands. He wanted that medicine cabinet. He would switch her Dilaudid with vitamin C tablets. Now, he saw her every day knowing she's taking what she thinks are Dilaudid for pain. This is his adopted grandmother. And he took her Dilaudid so he could get high one night. And she's going to go the next however many days with them vitamin C pills in there, taking them with no pain relief whatsoever. He saw that. He didn't care. He was in his addiction. He didn't care. Another gentleman told me he used to pull his car over, put the hood up. People would stop. You need help? Oh, I'm on my way to pick up my daughter from soccer practice and I ran out of gas and AAA said they come, but I got to give them the $3 or the $5 for gas. I have to pay for the gas and I left my wallet home. I was in such a rush. And she's there and people would give him $5 and people would give him $5 and after he had enough money, he would put the hood down and go. The worst part was because of his drug addiction, he wasn't even allowed to see his daughter anymore. But did he care? Did he use her as a pawn? Yes, he did. Didn't care nothing about it either. Domestic problems that interfere with work. Late phase. At this point, unless you're related to a county administrator, you're probably fired, right? At this point, you believe other activities interfere with your use. If you think I came here to do work, you're out of your mind. The only reason I got this job is to pay for my drugs. I am not here to do work, okay? I'm here because I need my paycheck. They blame people, places, and things for all their problems. It's your fault, I gotta use. It's raining today, I'm depressed, I gotta use. It's sunny today, I'm happy, I gotta use. Everything. Everything's an excuse for me to use. You're giving final warnings at this point, terminating. Again, people ain't working by this point. Serious financial problems, serious health problems. You look at these people, they look like that woman on that Faces a Mess slide in the upper right-hand corner, right? I mean, you look at this person, you're just like, good God almighty. Prolonged, unpredictable absences. They will go on binges where they're disappearing for days. Their family doesn't even know where they're at. They've been gone for 3-4 days. Nobody's even heard from them, right? They're totally 100% guaranteed using on the job. Another person that I tested for private was an attorney. He started with prescription pills from a car accident, got addicted, escalated to heroin. He admitted to me he was injecting himself in the courthouse bathroom at recess. He said recess came, everybody else was heading for the cafeteria or the conference rooms. I was heading in the bathroom. There was no way I could represent my client for the rest of the afternoon if I didn't go in there and shoot up. I was like, were you out of your mind shooting up in the courthouse bathroom, all the judges and police officers and fellow attorneys? He was like, it didn't matter. There was no way. So if an attorney will inject himself in the courthouse bathroom, don't tell me an addict won't use on Queen Anne's County government property. And then physical deterioration. So you want to look for specific evidence. Obviously, if you start seeing specific evidence of drug or alcohol use in your department or in your workplace, you got a problem. If the guy pulls up and he opens the truck door, the cab of the truck, and like 20 beer cans falls out, he's probably not recycling. There's probably an issue going on right there. These are the places that they're going to use. Lunchrooms or lounge areas, parking lots or cars are a big one, remote work site areas, equipment or storage areas, restrooms. They will totally go in the restroom and use, no qualms about it. No question about it. Anywhere that there's seclusion, they're going to go use. So what are your keys to success? Because I want you to be successful. You need to identify, document, confirm, and confront. So identify, you need to know the definition of reasonable suspicion, you need to know your role and responsibility, you need to tell the difference between a crisis, short term, versus a long term. Now when you come across the crisis situation, you are going to be getting a drug test that day on the person. Crisis is when they're coming in like this, or crisis is when you open the drawer and you find all them little rolled up bags of heroin. That's crisis. I mean, we're in late stages. This is a crisis. We're getting a drug test today. The long-term indicators are the performance. This is where, if you're paying attention, you're going to start seeing the slippage, and you can get them in the early stages to early. You can get them when they're still in the use. You can get them when they're still starting to cross into the abuse stage, and they can turn this ship around. So that's why you got to recognize these things and know the difference. Performance is where I'm first going to call you in and have that "I'm concerned about you" talk. So let's look at these. So we already talked about reasonable suspicion. I gave you all the definition. I explained it. You cannot ignore this. It is not going to get better. It's not going to go away. They're not going to miraculously get well overnight. They're going to continue until somebody or something happens. They're going to continue. Their disease is going to still continue to progress. Until they get sick and tired of being sick and tired, they're not going to make a change. So your responsibility is to be able to articulate and substantiate specific behavioral and performance indicators that are related to drug or alcohol misuse. It is not your responsibility to diagnose what particular drug they're using or what they're on. That's not what we're here to do. We're just trying to look for any possible indicators of performance that leads us to believe. We're on a fact-finding mission, okay? You have to remember that a referral for reasonable suspicion testing is not an accusation. When we get to these short-term indicators, these crisis situations, there's one of three things going on here. It's about an 85% chance that when I see these things, it's a drug use, drug or alcohol, right? The reason that they're seeing these signs and symptoms that we're going to talk about in a second are crisis, they're related to drug or alcohol use. About 15 to 20% of the time, it's an underlying medical problem that's causing these people to have these signs and symptoms, right? So you still need to intervene, because if we ruled out the drug test and we see it's not drugs, then we know it could be medical. Let's send them for some kind of fitness for duty evaluation. If it's not medical or drugs, 5 to 10% of the time, it's a psychological problem. Y'all remember that man that shot up Harford County a couple years ago? Well, if you listened on the news afterwards and they were talking to people, the co-workers were describing behaviors that are on this list. There were a lot of the behaviors on this list that should have triggered somebody to say, something's not right here, ruh-roh, we got to look at this. But everybody turned away, and as we said, it progressed, and he progressed, and it didn't get worse. So it's your job as a supervisor to get to the bottom of what is causing this. And we start with drugs because that's the most likely. So your role to orient, train, and inform your employees about the policy and to determine when reasonable suspicion testing is necessary. You are expected to determine fitness for duty, not what substances they may or may not be using. So the short-term indicators, these are observable physical evidence. Like I said, if you find drugs or paraphernalia, yeah, somebody's got to get a drug test, right? Also, any of these signs or symptoms, these are going to trigger. These are crisis. So if you start seeing any of these things, and these are all on the reasonable suspicion checklist, and there may be more, but these are the big ones. Odor of alcohol in their breath or their clothes, distinct pungent aroma on their person or clothing, strong chemical odor, dilated or constricted pupils, unfocused blank stare, bloodshot or watery eyes, nystagmus, that's where they have the involuntary jerky eye movement, slurred or slowed speech, if they're loud or boisterous when they're normally not, if they're quiet or whispering, they're incoherent, they're nonsensical, they have runny nose or bleeding nose. Now, obviously, if somebody has a nosebleed, you're not going to be like, that's it, you're going. I mean, come on, let's tamp this with some common sense. If they're repetitious and rambling, making sounds with their tongue, they seem pressured when the situation doesn't warrant it. There's excessive talkativeness, exaggerated enunciation. If they're cursing or inappropriately talking when they should, like really out of inappropriate. Fidgety, agitated, they're breathing irregular or with difficulty, nausea, vomiting, slowed reactions, unstable gait, wetting their lips frequently, dry mouth. People who abuse opiates, oftentimes when you're talking to them, we say they have the salami tongue. And they also, their lips will stick to their teeth when they're trying to talk to you. They can't talk to you because their lips are constantly stuck to their teeth. Salami tongue. Poor coordination. hand tremors, shaking, extreme fatigue, sleeping on the job, irritable, moody, suspicious, paranoid, depressed, withdrawn, lackadaisical attitude, disheveled clothing, unkempt grooming. They come to work and it's like, weren't you wearing those clothes yesterday? They probably were. They probably been out on an all-night binge and they just rolled in right from wherever they were getting high. Lackadaisical attitude. Oh, I already said that. Very large or small pupiled, flushed, very pale complexion, excessive sweating, skin clamminess, sensation of bugs crawling on your skin. Now you can see why any of these or a combination of these are going to trigger you to say, Bev, I'm concerned about you. This is what I saw. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to go through the list. We're going to go take a reasonable suspicion drug and alcohol test. And I'm telling her exactly why. I smell alcohol in your breath. You're staggering. You have slurred speech. I have reason to believe you've been using alcohol in the workplace, so I'm taking you for a test. End of story. It's not, open for discussion, right? Long-term indicators are a little more subtle. And again, if I'm seeing if Bev's coming in and, we smell alcohol and she's staggering and she's slurred speech, she's in the late stages, because if she's emboldened enough to show up to work drunk, she's in the late stages. So it's going to be a crisis. Boom, we're going for a test. She's in the addiction probably. Abuse cross into addiction if she's not in full-blown addiction. Long-term indicators are where we're going to try to get somebody early. So this is where you're going to look at performance patterns. And a lot of times, some of the upper-level management, you don't have the direct contact with the supervisors, so you're not going to see the slurred speech and the whatever, but you're going to see these performance things that should be raising red flags for you way before it gets to the point that somebody's coming in smelling like alcohol, slurred speech, right? So this is where you start. These are some of the long-term performance. Excessive absenteeisms on Fridays or Mondays, unreported absences, excessive emergencies, improbable excuses, leaving the work area unnecessarily. I told you, you can never find them. Every time you look for them, they're never where they're supposed to be. A lot of colds and flus, deterioration on their work product. They seem overwhelmed when the situation don't seem so. The financial problems, the money, the lapses in concentration, they're always on the phone. I'm starting to gloss over because I'm running out of time. The periods of high and low productivity, these are the things where you're starting to document performance, and you're going to call them in for that. I'm having a, concern about you. So your documentation is going to provide you specific evidence, objective factual information, a performance picture over time. You're going to show the pattern of declining behaviors, the ability, the documentation prevents any he said, she said, and a supportive of corrective action, what you're going to do. So your documentation should have the name of the employee, the date, time, and location of the incident, a short summary of what you observed, the involvement of any witnesses, the action you want to take to intervene, and what the employee's response is. I'm not going to go through these. This is like some of the stuff we've already talked about, some examples. So you're going to confirm what you have, okay? You have to remember, the primary issue is safety. Inquire and observe, make sure that what you have is right. You're noticing this absenteeism. Is this right? Check it out. Review your findings, verify the facts. Make the reasonable suspicion decision if you're going to. Isolate and inform the employee. Transport the employee, document. I'm just glossing over. We're going to get into the meat of these in a second here, in the few seconds we have. So you have to ask yourself the following questions. What do you see? Does it appear to be illegal activity or a specific policy violation or unusual behavior? Is it a group of people or is it a single person? Are you the direct supervisor? If you are, it's a good idea to call somebody else in. It's a good idea to have somebody else with you when you confront the employee anyway, but it's always a good idea to bring somebody that's not a direct supervisor. That way they can't say this person's picking on them because they don't know anything about them. Are there witnesses, reliable witnesses available? Is there any, if you're asking yourself this question, is there any physical danger in not taking action or in taking action? Okay, so they're so out of control that you're afraid to even approach them. That definitely, you need to intervene there. Is it a situation serious enough to require calling law enforcement or security? Is it a situation that's going to call for reasonable suspicion testing? And have you documented it? To satisfy the reasonable suspicion test, you have to ask yourself 3 questions. Are the facts objective? Could another equally trained supervisor come to the same conclusion? And is there a lack of responsibility in not requiring a test? If I see her slurred speech, staggering, smelling alcohol on her, okay, is it objective? Yes. Would somebody else make that determination? Yes. Am I irresponsible for not taking her? Absolutely yes. So there's no question. She needs to go. Okay, these are the reasons that supervisors give me for not taking somebody over. Well, I don't want to lose the employee's confidence or support. That's too late, because remember I told you the coworkers are already angry. They already know that somebody's in here using. They're already angry that you haven't done anything about it. So you've already lost a lot of confidence and support. I don't want to jeopardize the employee's ability to make a living. You didn't jeopardize anything. They did when they took a job in a drug-free workplace and decided to continue using illegal and illicit drugs. I don't like confrontation. Well, outside of ISIS, nobody does, so we all have to deal with what we have to deal with. That's why you're a supervisor. I don't want to have loss in productivity. Well, you already do, because the employee is not pulling their load, and they're bringing everybody else down, because the one slide I glossed over, one of the little tricks of employees who are using is to stir up strife in the workplace. They get two other employees arguing and fighting, because then you as the supervisor are paying attention to the two fighting and you're not paying attention to me. The other thing they do is purposely slow everybody's progress and everybody's productivity, because if everybody's slowed down, you're not going to notice what I'm not doing. Lack of training. Well, you can't say that. And I'm afraid for my personal safety. Okay, so again, you're so afraid of this person, you don't want to confront them, but you expect other people to work with them, or you're going to put them out there with the public. So these are the things, actions that you take that do not help a person. They are the worst things you can do. They're called enabling, okay? So some examples of enabling. Enabling is where you don't allow them to recognize the consequences of what they're doing. Covering up or providing alibis. I see supervisors doing this all the time, okay? This is where you take somebody and they're not getting their work done. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that work away from you and I'm going to give it to her. Now, what do you think you're going to do? What do you think the person that was using was going to do with that extra time that you just gave them? Use more? Laugh at you? Develop reasons why they continue to use. Well, I understand that, his house is getting foreclosed on and he's going through a divorce. Yeah, because he's a coke addict. Avoiding contact. I see supervisors doing this a lot. Okay, you know what? Their problem. I don't want to deal with them today. Is that going to make it any better? Is that going to make it go away? Blaming. This is more spouses, but sometimes supervisors do that. You kind of say, hint to them, you know what? You're not, you got to shape up and do better. And they're not, and they continue doing, and then you get angry because you feel like they're not really trying. Controlling, again, this is where you minimize the impact by moving them to a less important job. All you're doing is giving them more time to use. Threatening, this is a big one supervisors do. You say you're going to do something and then you don't do it. You're a paper tiger. And then when they get caught, you know what they're going to say? It's your fault because you knew and you didn't do anything about it. You let me continue on. You saw me and you didn't do nothing about it. In fact, in one of the workplaces I administered for, the guy got caught and the supervisor had confronted him 4 or 5 times because he suspected he was using, and he was covering and not saying anything. And then when the guy got fired, he sued, claiming that the supervisor was part of his, enabled him to use because the supervisor knew he was using and didn't do anything about it. Should have followed the procedures and didn't follow the workplace policy, so it was his fault that he got terminated. Don't wait until somebody gets hurt to address this, because it is not going to get better. So you got to confront. Immediately remove them from their duties. Interview them in a private area. Be prepared with your documentation. Be confident. Be diplomatic, polite, but firm. Get your documentation ready. Oh, let me just go back. I went way too far. I'm not going to powder this up and tell you this is going to be all sunshine and roses. This is going to be, without a doubt, one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life. I'm not going to lie and powder it up and say it's not. But you are a supervisor and you have to do this. This is your responsibility. Okay? So, how do you make it a little bit easier? Get yourself ready. Have your facts ready in front of you. Prepare yourself. Again, think about what you're going to say. Have somebody there to support you. Think about what's going to happen. Now, I can tell you right now, the employee is going to come at you with everything they have to try to distract you, get you off of this, change the subject. One of the things that often happens when you bring in an employee to confront them is you're going to start hearing about a bunch of other stuff in the workplace. Okay? I'm going to confront Beverly, and then she's going to tell me about John stealing and about this one doing this, because, hey, why not? I got to save myself. I'll throw everybody else under the bus. One of the grocery stores I test for, the guy, they seen him on the camera hiding liquor bottles in the grocery aisle. When they brought him in, he uncovered a whole bootleg black market dairy ring that was being sold out of the back of the store. So set the stage, use constructive confrontation, refer the employee for assistance, have all your ducks in a row. Make sure you know you have the EAP's number, you're all set on what to do if you're going to take them for a drug test, set performance goals, and follow up on the goals. Be non-confrontational, non-accusatory, don't try to solicit a confession. Do it in a private location. Think about what you're going to say. And again, anticipate, because it's coming, the questions, the denials, and the threats. I guarantee it. So your first thing you do is you tell the employee that you're concerned about them. That's why you call them in. State what the problem is. Okay, Bob, you only missed 3 days all of last year. We're at the end of February, and you've already missed 12 days this year. You see why I'm concerned, okay? Refer to your documentation, because you have to get specifics, because Bob's going to be like, I haven't missed 12 days, and then boom, you're going to go right down the list of all the days he's missed. Do not overgeneralize. You're opening the door for them to put you on defense. You're on offense at this point. You're in charge of this situation. If you give the reins over to them and let them, and you start becoming defensive, this is going to go way worse than you ever thought about. One of the common denominators in all people who abuse drugs and alcohol is the ability to manipulate. That's how they get into the addiction that they get into, is because they can manipulate everybody very well. And you are no exception in this case. So you have to gird yourself up. Ask the employee to offer an explanation. Avoid getting involved in the discussion of personal problems. That is a trap to try to make you feel sorry for them. They're going to start talking about all these poor, terrible things that are going wrong with them, so you forget why you actually called them in. Try to get the employee to acknowledge what you see as a problem. You understand why I'm concerned, Bob? You missed the 12 days already. Have the EAP information ready. Bob, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know. You're having problems at home, whatever. The county has a wonderful EAP. Here's the number. You can use my phone. I'll step out, call, do whatever you need to do. But then you're going to state what has to happen. If you continue to miss days, Bob, we're having a follow-up meeting in a month. If you miss any more time, unfortunately, you're going to be suspended, or you're going to be terminated, or whatever. So if you need to call this EAP and get whatever it is that's causing you to miss this time straightened out, I suggest you do it. Oh, I'm going backwards, ain't I? Okay, don't fall into the traps. These are the traps that they're going to try to throw at you to get you off your game. They're going to try to get you feel sorry for them, sympathy. They're going to come up with a gazillion excuses for why whatever you said. He'll have 12 reasons for why he missed the 12 days, and they'll all be doozies. He's going to be so sorry. If you could, look, I'm so sorry. If you can just forget about this, I promise it won't happen again. They'll try to give you diversions. Again, talking about other stuff in the workplace, the guy with the bootleg milk. Innocence. It's not them, it's everybody else. The other people are just setting them up. Anger. Okay, it's your fault. You expect too much. I mean, the county's made all these cuts, and we're like 5 people trying to do the work of 10, and you expect us to do. Pity. You know, you've been my supervisor for 5 years. I can't believe you're doing this. Why would you do this to me? You know what I'm going through. They'll try to make you feel sorry for it, and get ready for the tears. You might as well have multiple boxes of Kleenex, because they're going to use them, and you're probably going to be using them. So if you are going to take somebody for a reasonable suspicion test, do not let them use the bathroom before you get them over here. Do not let them go back out into the desk or whatever area. Listen, another employee will, for $100, give a urine sample. I'm sorry to say, but you know, they will. It happens all the time. At the collection site, you let the collector know DOT or non-DOT. On the way to the collection, you might get a variety of stories, either going or coming, as to why the test is. You know, I was at this concert last night, and these guys in front of me were smoking pot, and I said, please don't smoke no pot. I drive a truck for Queen Anne's County government, but they laughed in my face and blew pot smoke right in my face, and that's why I'm going to test positive. You don't have to comment. Write down what they say. Get all your documentation. Turn it over to Beverly. Alcohol testing should occur right away. If it doesn't occur within 2 hours, you have to write down why. If it doesn't occur within 8 hours, forget about it. Drug testing, again, should be right away. If it doesn't occur within 32 hours, forget about it. Explain to the employee if they say they're not going to take the test. A refusal is an automatic positive. Okay, the employee needs to understand their problems won't be made public. Conversations with the EAP are confidential, but anything related to performance will be in their employee file. Okay, you need to identify and investigate crisis situations, recognize workplace problems that may be related to drug or alcohol, intervene in problem situations, protect confidentiality, continue to supervise employees who have been referred. Don't fall into the traps. If somebody looks to be backsliding or doing the same things that made you call them in the first time, they may very well be. Okay? Know your employees. Make sure unfit employees do not perform their duties. Document job performance regularly. Evaluate and discuss the performance. That's the only way you're going to recognize patterns. Take action when performance fails. Document and act in a manner that doesn't demean or label. Emphasize you're only concerned with the employee. Have your documentation ready. Remember, the problems are only going to get worse. Emphasize the EAP is confidential. That's why they're there, to help the employee. And call the EAP if necessary. Do not solicit a confession. Don't try to make them admit what they've been doing. Don't moralize and try to limit your comments right to what we're talking about, performance. Don't discuss your suspicions with other employees. Do you really, have you ever, don't do that. Don't accuse the employee. I know you're taking coke. I know it. I had training. I know this. I'm trained. I know these things. Don't do that. Don't be misled by sympathy-evoking tactics. Don't cover up. You're not protecting them. And don't make threats you intend to carry out. It's not your responsibility to diagnose the problems, to have all the answers, to be a counselor or a therapist, unless that is your job, or to be a cop, unless that is your job. If you see a problem, confront it. If your employees have problems, you have problems. If you don't deal with it, you're a problem. And if you don't address it, it's only going to get worse. We are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you guys ever have questions, you're not sure, you don't want to take it to HR, you just want to kind of talk it out, we're available. That's what we're here for. You can call us. We want to help you. Thank you, guys. I kept y'all like 5 minutes too late.
All right, one quick thing. They're available 24 hours a day. If you have something that happens, you need to call me. Like she said, we can't wait. These things don't wait till Monday morning at 9 o'clock. So please feel free to call me if you don't have my number plugged into your phone number, your cell phone. I know some of you already do. Please plug it in today.